some county meetings that we have to reschedule because of she has to attend that.
Because I was really hoping she was coming to the river county at 1:30.
They got a miss cheating on the mission.
She had told me she had a family and she couldn't talk about it right then. Okay.
Oh,
New to that. Second meeting is Tuesday.
yeah. It's good board.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn a lot.
You ready? Get started. Do I start? Okay. All right. Are we live? Okay, we're live, and good morning. Welcome to Pasco County Government Center. I welcome you all here. And hopefully there weren't many downed trees on your drive here. I did see one on Starkey Boulevard. But I want to call to order the November Legislative Subcommittee meeting. And do we need to take roll call? Okay.
Cliff Manuel will not be joining us here, but I believe he is on the computer. Cliff, are you there? Okay. Janet Long will not be joining us today. Jim Holton.
Here.
Commissioner Mitten.
Here.
Commissioner Starkey.
Here.
And Rich McLean.
I see him. Okay, so persons wishing to address the board can do so in either of two ways. Email your comments to publiccomment@tbarta.com no later than 30 minutes prior to the meeting start time, and your comments will be read into the record. To speak during the meeting, phone 1-267-866-0999 with access code 123435187630. No, 30 minutes, that 30 is 30 minutes prior to the meeting, sorry. You'll first speak to a staff member and then be able to provide public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes when recognized by the chairman. This public comment period will be extended for up to 30 minutes. So at this time, I'm going to move to the consent agenda items and sorry, I don't remember. Do we need to approve the consent?
I'm on forum today, so I'll just push it through to the next meeting in January.
Okay. Then we'll move to the information items, correct? Okay. So our first one is the federal legislative update with Harry Glenn. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning, Commissioner. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody survived the hurricane okay. Just to give you a couple of quick updates on what's going on. As you know, this is the election that never ends. I'm sure everybody understands where we are with the presidential election. We're going to talk about that. The Senate, as you know, is currently at 50 Republicans, 48 Democrats, with 2 runoffs in Georgia. And that runoff will begin, or it will be held on January 5th, although the mail-in ballots go out on December 7th, hard to believe, and early voting there begins on December 14th. So we'll have an election January 5th to determine the control of the Senate. Both the current incumbents are Republicans, so we'll see how that goes. In the House, they're continuing to count votes in 13 House races have not been called yet of the 435. Currently, the Democrats have 219 seats and the Republicans 203. So that ensures that the Democrats will remain in control of the House. The Republicans did pick up 10 Democrat seats in the House, and the Democrats picked up 3 open Republican seats for a net gain of 7 Republican seats so far, with, as I said, 13 still to go. So they're expecting anywhere from a 7 to 10 seat loss for the Democrats. So the Democrats' margin in the House will be much narrower. So it's going to make things a little more complicated in the House to get things approved. All that said, that just leaves a little bit of uncertainty that the new Congress, the 117th Congress will reconvene on January 4th this year because the 3rd is a Sunday. And so we won't know the control of the Senate. And once they convene, it'll take a couple of days to figure that out. So that's going to slow down work in the House and the Senate. And the new president will be inaugurated on January 20th. So December and January are going to be very busy months. So, a lot of uncertainty. As with any new Congress, there'll be some new committee chairmanships yet to be decided, including the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee hasn't been determined yet. There's a little bit of committee juggling going on there, so potentially have a new chairman there, and also the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, which actually oversees all the federal transit programs. That hasn't been determined yet. There may be a shift there to a Pennsylvania senator, which would be good. He's a good friend of transit, but we'll continue to let you know how that goes, and hopefully we'll have more information at the next legislative committee meeting next month. With that, legislatively, the Senate reconvened on Monday of this week. The House reconvenes on Monday of next week. So they have a 3 to 4 week sprint to get a lot of work done before the end of the year. As we've talked to you before, one of the major issues is trying to do another COVID relief bill. That effort stalled out before the election. The White House and the Secretary of the Treasury, who were negotiating with the Speaker prior to the election, have stepped away from the negotiations now and turned it over to Senator McConnell and told him that he's now responsible for negotiating with the Speaker of the House. They haven't met yet. The reporting yesterday and overnight was that the mood is that there's probably not going to be another COVID relief bill before the end of the year. Senator McConnell wanted to do a smaller, more targeted bill in the $500 billion range. The Speaker continues to want to do a larger $1 to $2 trillion bill. And so it's a pretty wide gap there on whether they're going to get anything done or not. But we haven't given up hope, and they continue to hold out some hope. Committees continue to work on various issues, and we'll let you know how that goes. The other major issue to be resolved before the end of the year is the federal budget. As you may recall from our last conversation, the House and Senate approved a continuing funding resolution to keep the government open and operating through December 11th. So that's the next deadline that we face. They're going to try and resolve as many of the 12 regular appropriations bills before that deadline as they can. They probably won't get them all done, but transportation is one that typically is non-controversial, and they think they can get done before the end of the year. The Senate reported out all of its appropriations bills finally on Tuesday, which is a good sign that will move things along. And in the Senate, just to give you the Senate bill is very generous in funding transportation and transit programs. They continue to fund the BUILD Act at $1 billion, which is a good transportation infrastructure program. They continue to fund most of the transit programs at last year's levels, to include the Low-No electric bus grant program and the most of the major transit infrastructure programs, including bus and bus facilities. So that's a good sign, and that the gap between the House and Senate bills is pretty narrow. So that should be good news for transit programs. And so we'll see what happens on December 11th. The expectation is they'll do some, not all the bills. They'll include those in a big package, along with a continuing funding resolution for the agencies that don't get funded in that bill to keep them going into next year. And they may or may not include some additional COVID relief in that package. There is a real need here to provide some funding for the vaccine distribution program to the states. And you also the good news about the Pfizer vaccine, that it could be ready for distribution as early as December. And so they need funds to get ready for that distribution program. So there may be an opportunity to include some COVID relief in that final budget bill. The last thing I want to talk about is there's strong conversation going on, bipartisan conversation in the House and the Senate about an infrastructure bill in the early part of the new Congress. Most administrations are measured on the first 100 days of their administration or the new Congress, and Yesterday, one of the President-elect's key transportation advisors, John Picari, who was a deputy transportation secretary under President Obama, said that the president wants to do an infrastructure bill within the first 100 days of his administration. And so that's a good sign. Some Republicans piped up and said they support that effort. And so I think there's going to be a real push in the new year to get a bill done before the end of March or the middle of April. So that's a good sign. But just to not to throw cold water on it, but just the trick continues to be how to pay for it with declining fuel sales tax and other reductions in revenue. The trick is to find out where they're going to get the money to pay for that. But there's some creative ideas out there, and they'll continue to work on it. So that's important, because what they do in this infrastructure bill will probably include the reauthorization for the highway and transit programs, which is a 5-year authorization. So that's going to cover the next 5 years of some of the areas that you're most interested in. So we will continue to work on those areas and keep David and the committee advised on what's going on. So that's our report here. I'm happy to answer any questions.
No questions from me.
I have a question, and I was going to bring this up in discussion and other items, but I think it's appropriate maybe to bring it up here. So I don't know if you all saw the story, came out a few days ago about Tavistock partnering with Lilium, who's the company that gave us a presentation about their, I think they called it a vertiport. Is there any federal funding available for innovative new programs like that we might consider and hopefully partner with Tavistock? Are they getting any federal funding? They're doing it on their own? And so those are all my questions.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, what I would say is, I don't know I saw the stories too about what they're doing over at Lake Nona. I don't know what their business plan is on whether they plan to seek federal funding. I haven't seen anything saying that they are seeking federal funding. There are several federal programs related to research and development that they may qualify for. There are also several transportation planning programs that they could qualify for if they need to develop the planning and the engineering for the project. So there could be some potential there. And then obviously there are some of the larger federal programs, the build grant, the $1 billion bill that will fund future transportation infrastructure. So I mean, that would be something that they could qualify. The trick with those is most of those programs require a governmental entity to apply for those grants. So I guess they would probably have to work with a local government or a planning agency if they were going to seek some federal funding for that. So, but we're happy to continue to search out opportunities if that's something that they want to do.
So I don't know where the proper place is to talk about this, Mr. Chairman, but I think it's an idea that we should explore as we look for funding for this new kind of transportation.
I completely concur with that, Commissioner, and I think that that and our other innovative projects too, with the Gondola, Hyperloop, and others that we have studied for legislative mandate, is a good idea to direct Harry and the team to look into possible grant opportunities, in the coming sessions of Congress to do that. So always that money's welcome, and especially when Florida is facing DOT shortfalls. So,
hey, Mr. Chairman, one of the things we may want to think about is obviously there's going to be new leadership in the Department of Transportation coming in. And so once we figure out who the leadership is in those positions at the department and at the FTA, maybe do some presentation for them on some of the technologies that you've all taken a look at, and lay them out for them to see what their take is. And the infrastructure bill coming up, there may be an opportunity there to use that as a vehicle to encourage them to support some of the work you're doing in the Tampa Bay area.
I think that's a wise opportunity, and have you heard, kind of following up on that too, if there's going to be a shift and a reemphasis on rail and legacy kind of transportation systems, or is there a move away from that to to more things like we have studied BRT and non-fixed dedicated permanent lines for things.
Yeah, I don't know that I haven't seen anything that says exactly what their priorities are, although I did see some reporting this past week that the president-elect was supportive of a California high-speed rail project. And he's also indicated his support for what they call the Gateway Project in the New York-New Jersey reformat in the New York City, which is a rail initiative. So, I mean, he's a guy that the president-elect rode the train every day from Washington to Delaware back and forth with the rail initiative. But it's not to say he won't support other innovative technologies. Talk about all of them.
Well, I think with Orlando stepping up, I'm kind of not so happy they beat him to the punch, but the Orlando, it looks like right now they're talking about flying from Orlando to Tampa and back. But I think we have a great opportunity to partner on this I-4 corridor. And if we get everyone aligned in Central Florida, maybe we take the lead in the whole country on some of this, on some of this stuff. So I think it's a great opportunity and we need to go for it. So, are there any other questions for?
Well, to that point, Commissioner, too, I would encourage us to reach out to the appropriate officials in Orlando.
Yeah.
To enter into that dialogue too, as to how we can all work together and potentially leverage that I-4 corridor for overall money.
Yep.
For transit.
And when Secretary Gwynn's on, we can, in one of our future committees or the meeting, we can talk to him more about it, right?
Yeah, as much
because that's District 5, I think.
Yeah, that's District 5. As much as we can, we need to try and collaborate.
Yeah.
And if Orlando's willing to work with us, TBarta is very well positioned to be part of that conversation. So.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so now I think we have our state legislative update from Ron. Thank you very much, Perry. Morning, Ron.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Thank you for the opportunity. Sorry I cannot be with you this morning. Just a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to be sending to David later this morning. David, Caitlin will send it to me, that to the full board. We do have an election report that we can share with the full board. Let me just hit a couple of highlights for you. At the state level, the Florida House picked up 5 seats for Republicans, which in this political environment was a little bit of surprise. I mean, to be honest with you, and I think the Florida, House leadership would tell you that as well. There was a number of competitive races out there. They not only kept all of the competitive seats, but he also picked up 5 Democratic seats. One in St. Petersburg and Jennifer Webb's seat, one down in Miami for the Margaret Good seat. She ran for Congress and lost against Fern Buchanan. One over in Port St. Lucie, and then also 2 down in Miami. So again, the Florida House picked up 5 seats, which increases the Republican majority to 78 to 42. In the Florida Senate, may even be a bigger surprise, to be honest with you. There was 2 very competitive seats. There was an Orlando seat and a Miami seat. Republicans not only held both of those seats, they also picked up another Miami seat. There was a recount that came back yesterday, and the Republicans picked up that seat. Ileana Garcia beat JJR Senator Rodriguez by 34 votes with one of the closest races in the entire state. That became official last night. So again, the Republicans will pick up 1 seat in the Senate. So their majority now is 24 to 16. Right after the election, you've started to see committee weeks have been announced. There's 2 weeks in January. There's 3 in February, which kind of follows that traditional calendar of an election year. So again, 2 committee weeks in January, 3 in February. Session starts on March the 2nd and ends on May the 7th. We still don't know what protocols are going to look like for access to the Capitol. They released protocols for organizational session, which is next Tuesday, which they're not going to allow public access at this point. We do believe they will allow probably some version of public access starting in January. But again, at this point, we're not sure to what extent, or more importantly, what will be some of the protocols for access to the building. So we'll keep you updated on that. With that being said, though, we have started planning our trips to Tallahassee. We've already started working with David. We reached out yesterday to get a couple of dates on the calendar just to block some times where we know that David and appropriate board members can come to Tallahassee and meet with not only the ball delegation, but more importantly, House and Senate leadership on our bill and also our appropriations as well. So we'll keep you updated on that. As I told David yesterday, we have to at least block something out on the calendar. Hopefully we'll have access to the Capitol and be able to go and do kind of our traditional lobbying. Worst case scenario, we'll be doing this. We'll be doing some version of a virtual meeting with members to share with them our appropriations issue and also our bill as well. So we are finalizing bill sponsors for our bill, which that will be done in the next couple of weeks. Our goal would be to have bill sponsors lined up by early December, have bills submitted to bill drafting and filed sometime in early January, and position them to be heard sometime in February, which we believe that's really the first time you'll see bills start moving. From past experiences, my guess would be the January committee meetings will be a lot of presentations on budget, COVID, and kind of other related issues from last year, kind of getting ready, setting the table for legislation. Our appropriations, same thing. We're finalizing kind of who will be our House and Senate appropriations sponsor. So we're finalizing that. And again, we'll be able to announce that at our next meeting. I know we're going to talk about this at the Finance Committee meeting, but I will briefly mention it here. Chairman Holton asked us to look into if there's any FEMA or any Department of Economic Opportunity dollars that are out there that TBarta may qualify for. And the short answer is no. We looked at the federal level from a FEMA standpoint. Most of the FEMA dollars are tied to either direct emergency related cost from a reimbursement standpoint. Some of the dollars that are flowing through DEO are related to CARES Act, which we've already qualified for that, for CARES Act, obviously, but we weren't aware of any other programs at this point that we may qualify for. With that being said, the one thing that we have been told by DEO is we obviously need to kind of watch what's happening at the federal level. As Harry pointed out, there could be some type of a stimulus package that comes down with the new Congress. If that is the case, there may be some dollars in there for local and state governments we may qualify for. But they submitted it. They kind of gave that to me with a caveat, though, which I found interesting, is most likely if there's something that does come available from a local and state government standpoint, there's a chance that we may not qualify directly being a special district. We may have to qualify through working with city, county, or the state potentially. And so, when the appropriate time is, if there's anything that comes down from the federal government, we'll work with Harry, and I'll talk a little bit more about that during the Finance Committee as well. So I'll stop there and see if anybody's got any questions or comments.
Chair, quick question. Ron, have you had any discussions with the governor's office about with a potential rebound of the COVID issue, whether he's going to allow for Zoom meetings again in terms of an executive order? Or is there a possibility of giving special districts the flexibility to do that, because not all are the same throughout the state? And when there's a rebound, for example, in Tampa or whatever, we might need to, it would be more efficacious to have a Zoom meeting, especially since we have the quorum issues here.
Sure. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we have not had that conversation yet. The last we talked to the governor's office was when the current executive order expired for allowing us to be able to do virtual meetings. I know that was the governor's office and his intention was to hopefully be able to move forward with, regularly scheduled meetings in the future. Obviously, as numbers start going back up, that may be something they may have to revisit in December going into January potentially. So I think a lot of that will be driven by the numbers. I would expect probably no changes for the remainder of this year, but I think it could be something we need to keep an eye out for January. As we've talked about too, as a board, this I think only strengthens kind of our argument for the need to be able to have virtual meetings as a regional organization. And so that's something we'll revisit as a part of our discussions with legislators on our legislation.
Thanks.
Board members, any other questions for Mr. Pierce? Okay, thank you very much, Ron.
Very good. Thank you, everybody.
All right, we're now at discussion and/or action items. And I was gonna bring up that Lilium article, but I already did. Do we have any action items? Because I don't show any here.
No.
And we couldn't take any anyway, right? Okay, so future meeting subjects. The next legislative subcommittee meeting is January 22nd at 8:30 in Manatee County. Some of us will be spending the night in Manatee County to get there at 8:30 in the morning. And so we will now be adjourned for 5 minutes, I guess. So, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to go? I'll call the meeting to order for the Finance Committee. I can take the roll.
Jim Holton,
Here.
Cliff Manuel, Commissioner Long will not be joining us today. Rich McLean.
Here.
Commissioner Starkey.
Here.
Commissioner Mitten.
Here.
And Commissioner Bellamy will also not be joining us today.
Do we have quorum?
We do not be allowed to 3 in person, and we need 4 in person.
Okay, even for the committee, that's correct. Okay. Can you go ahead and read the public comment PSA then?
So we do have our virtual comment line still open. We are monitoring it. To speak during the meeting, dial 267-866-0999 with access code 1234-35-187630. Sorry.
No, I did this.
We'll first speak to a staff member and then be able to provide public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes when recognized by the chairman. This public comment period will be extended for up to 30 minutes. And then back to our normal in-person public comment, persons wishing to address the board are requested to complete a comment card and give it to staff. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. The public comment period can be extended for up to 30 minutes. We do not have any public comments at this time.
Okay, thanks. Move on to consent agenda items. We don't have a quorum, so we'll defer that to the next Finance Committee meeting. Next up is information items, and I recognize Melanie Williams to give a report.
Good morning. So included in your packet is September 2020 and October 2020 financials. The draft financials of September 2020, since it ends in the fiscal year of 2020, even though it's the draft, the final report will be out in the spring once we get the financials audited. But I would like to go over some highlights with you for the end of the fiscal year 2020. So the year to date through the month of September, our net surplus was $184,761. Now this was $8,500 over the budgeted amount of $176,000. So going to the revenues, we were under budget about $2.2 million due to the timing of all the PD&E and the technology projects. And also in expenses, we were under budget of $2.2 in pretty much all of the categories. We were under budget for the year. So for the end of the year, for the balance sheet, our accounts receivable ended up being about $2.1 million, offsetting the accounts payable of $1.6 million. At the end of the fiscal year 2020, we had approximately $112,000 in the bank. So those were the key highlights for the fiscal year ending in September. So moving on to the last month, for the beginning year of fiscal 2021, in October, the first month, our year-to-date through the month of October was a net surplus of $534,000. Now, this was $22,000 over the budget amount of $512,000. So looking at the revenues to make up this difference is we were under budget for about $400,000, and it's also due to the timing of some of the PD&E studies and the use of the STP and the federal dollars funds. And in the expense category, we were under budget of pretty much all of the categories due to the timing of the expenses. So at the end of October, our accounts receivable balance was approximately $2.3 million, offsetting with that with the accounts payable balance of $1.3 million. And at the end of October, our cash balance was $109,000. And that pretty much wraps up the financials for the last 2 months. Any questions?
Okay, members, questions for Melanie?
Looks great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, good report, thanks. Okay, next up, the chair recognizes Diane Doerr and Ron Pierce again. Are they on the lines? We're gonna present.
Mr. Chairman, I'm here. I'm happy to report and let Diane jump in as needed.
Okay, I think this is principally on the HUD DEO stuff that we talked about before.
It is, yes, sir. Yep. So I know Diane looked into it as well, and again, I'll let Rick jump in. From my perspective, we reached out to a couple of, we reached out to the governor's office as well as DEO directly, as well as a couple legislators' office. And as I said earlier in the previous report, we are not aware of any specific programs we would qualify for today. Most of the FEMA programs that are out there are for reimbursement for, programs during natural disaster, which obviously we don't qualify for directly. However, they did say that through DEO, some of the CARE Act dollars have been flowing through there, which we've already qualified for. As I said earlier, some of the dollars that flow down don't flow down directly to us because we're a special district. So that's something to keep in mind. So if there is something that comes down, we can keep in touch with Harry on the next stimulus package. If something does come down that flows through the state, to make sure that who would be the best to work through, if it would be a city, county, or directly with the state directly. With that being said, I'll be happy to turn it over to Diane.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I concur with what Ron has said as it relates to the DEO program. What happens is monies from the federal government flows to DEO for small cities and small counties. The small cities would be those that would have populations of 50,000 residents or less. Small counties are considered 200,000 or less. In addition to that, entitlement cities and counties, those with larger populations, get their funding directly from the government. So what DEO has done is just specifically for small cities and small counties. As Ron has also suggested, whenever the COVID money was sent to the state, again, it is for municipalities. So if we were wanting to capitalize on some of that, it would be in our best interest to try and, make, collaborative efforts with those.
Right, and my initial thinking on doing that was, I know it goes to counties or cities. You could potentially, and you get HUD grants, CBDG grants, or disaster HUD grants, not FEMA grants, but disaster HUD grants. But I think we would have to be a co-participant with one of the impacted counties that was designated like an urban impacted county or city to do that. And that might be within our jurisdiction, might be worthwhile looking at to see if there are any transit dollars available. Hillsborough County, Pasco County, Pinellas County that sits in that DEO pot for under the HUD category.
Yes, and as it relates to the FEMA grants, I know that oftentimes those grants are for disaster recovery. Right. So again, there may be an opportunity at some point when those are offered through the state, that may be an opportunity for TBarta to capitalize on as well.
Members, questions? Commissioner?
Well, excuse me. So counties over the population of 500,000 get that money direct. And that's CDBG-DR money, I think is what you're talking about. And I do think we just got another round of it. So I will check with my county to see if there's any of that that's eligible for TBarta. And I would suggest that we ask Pinellas and Hillsborough to do the same. Now yours would have to go through that.
Correct, because we have a much smaller population, and there's also challenges with the lower pots of money that you are maybe at risk at reimbursement as well. So there's a challenge there. As opposed to having the money up front, it's a lot more flexible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also with the small cities and small counties, their allocation, usually those funds are competitive. So it would, you would have to offer, a grant that's better than the next county or next city per se. It's very, very competitive, but it is available whenever the funds are sent down to the state. It is, it's a good sum of money, but then you're limited by the pool of counties and cities that can apply.
A follow-up question. The funds, are they restricted to capital or O&M or what's?
Well, it would depend on what type funding has been sent down from the federal government, because like, for instance, FEMA and their disaster recovery programs, those funds would usually be like for infrastructure type improvements, stormwater, things of that nature that would go to cities or counties. Other type disaster recovery would be for housing initiatives that is actually sent down from HUD.
Well, yeah, I'm aware of all that. I actually sit on one of the national boards that deals with all of that.
Okay.
But I'm curious if if transit is eligible for CDBG-DR money, what category of, how can that be used? Are you aware?
I don't know, Ron, would that be along the lines of economic improvement or development?
The short answer, Commissioner Starkey, is I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I would say probably operations, well, at least in our case, it would have to be operations, right? Because we don't have any infrastructure to invest in. So I do some of those grants do allow for operations on a short-term basis. So it would have to be operations in our case.
Well, I think that's something I definitely will explore, see if there's anything for TBarta in our CDBG-DR funds.
Okay.
And I would encourage all the other counties to do likewise. And staff, David, can you reach out to the other counties and relay this discussion?
So that does not go to the MPO or those departments. It goes to community development or. Yeah.
Commissioner, it's Harry. I don't know. Commissioner, it's Harry. I don't know if can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, I'm sorry. I was the Pinellas County had called, so I had to jump off to talk to them for a second before one of their meetings. But I didn't hear the whole discussion. But if you're talking about CDBG-DR, the only recipients who are eligible for that, I believe, are qualified CDBG recipients. So transit authorities don't receive CDBG funding. So TBarta couldn't receive a direct allocation. Is your question whether counties can provide some of their CDBG-DR money to TBarta? Is that the question?
Yeah, that's what we were exploring. So that sounds like a no.
Yeah, I think that's
Harry?
a no. We can check on that though with the folks at HUD.
Okay. That would be good, right? Thank you.
And Harry was specifically the disaster relief funds for, hurricane impacted counties, which I know that many in the Tampa Bay were from a pot of money from Irma, and I think from some of the other storms too. So it wasn't the classic block grant redevelopment grants or improvement grants. It was actual, disaster recovery money through the HUD program.
That's correct, but there are several pots of disaster money. Some of the money goes actually to the state, and then entities apply through the state for some of those funds. So there's some mitigation money that comes through. There is a FEMA disaster assistance program that you could apply for potentially, and that's some of that money is for use to make project programs more resilient in the future. I know. A transit provider could provide money to fix bus stop areas that might flood on a regular basis, or repair stations or other things that flooded during high water events like we just had. So there is FEMA money, disaster assistance money that is available. You can apply for to try and prevent future disasters from occurring. So there are some opportunities there. I'm not sure what you would have in that regard at this point.
Well, one idea, we had a number of the opportunities that we are looking at innovatively, such as the Gondola and others, are potential ancillary devices for hurricane evacuation too. So there could be a mitigation factor there for future storms. I think at least to make a plausible argument there if we want to get creative. So that's something we might want to coordinate with state DEO and look at, and then see what the federal opportunities are there through HUD or FEMA.
And Mr. Chairman, Congress created a new program in 2018 that's just being implemented this year. In fact, the notice of funding opportunity just rolled out at the end of September for resiliency programs funded through FEMA. And those you actually apply through the state, and the state forwards the applications on to FEMA. There's an application, and we'll forward it on to David. There's an opportunity. I think the application period is open until the middle of January. It does require that whatever you're trying to do is included on disaster preparedness list for the local metropolitan area, whether it's the MPO or the local region. So you may need to work with your MPOs, Ford, Pinellas, those groups on that.
It's something to worth look at, I would think. And members, I absolutely think we have to look for every pots of money we can, and maybe the lobbying team can certainly work with the rest of staff and Diane to get this down to something we could potentially distill down to make an application for something.
Certainly.
Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Members, any other questions on this item? Okay, none being going forward, we'll look at the community services ad campaign, and the chair recognizes Chris Caddick.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Let me just say it's a pleasure to be able to speak to you in person for a change. This is a request for a recommendation from the Finance Committee to the board for approval of an expenditure of $101,500 for an advertising campaign to support commuter services. I understand there's no quorum here today, but I do believe that by consensus, you may be able to take some action on this. What I want to do is explain two things. First of all, where the money is coming from and what the money would be used for. First, important to understand that this is coming from a grant that specifically is committed to promoting the van pool program. This is from the FHWA Surface Transportation Program. We have a $350,000 total grant for that. And the purpose of this agreement, and I quote, says, the purpose of this agreement is to expand the regional van pool program. I just want to make that clear because obviously we're being very fiscally careful in this time. So these are not CARES Act money. These are not operating funds. These are from a grant that is specifically for promotion of the van pool program. Of the money in that account, $350,000, 75% of that is specified for marketing of the van pool program. We have $135,000 budgeted in the TBarta budget this year for that purpose. And this expenditure of $101,000 comes from that budgeted expense. So let me explain some of our thinking as to how we wanted to use this money to help promote the regional van pool service. The idea is that as people start to return to the roads in the spring and people start to rethink their commuting habits, we put everything on hold, obviously, during 2020, but we want to make sure that we're engaging directly with commuters as they are driving to and from work. We know from the Hillsborough Expressway Authority that traffic is beginning to resume again. We know from the folks at Enterprise, folks that are telling us that people are beginning to use van pools a little bit more, so they're seeing an uptick in activity. We're looking to the spring because we certainly have another COVID period to go by, and we're thinking we want to engage with commuters as they actually are driving to those places of employment. So a billboard campaign that would actually get to drivers when they're driving in traffic or slowly moving in traffic would be the best way to engage with them, both moving into and out of Hillsborough County. So we reached out to essentially 3 agencies that are best suited to do this in this area. There is Lamar, Clear Channel, and Outdoor. And each of them gave us a response, and the Clear Channel proposal was superior in the amount of impressions that it would offer us. So there's more value for that. They were also very strategic in how they wanted to place the billboards. We are going to be placing these billboards digitally on interstates that are leading into and out of Hillsborough County. The idea being that we want to capture those who are traveling long distances. We know from experience that those who are interested in a regional van pool are not those drivers who go 5-10 miles to work, but they have a 15-20 mile commute. So the idea of capturing people as they cross county lines from Pasco or Pinellas or Manatee into Hillsborough County was the idea. We also want to engage with people digitally because in addition to billboards, people are, going on their phones or going on the internet, and we know that there's a lot of ad placements that way. And what we really like about the Clear Channel proposal is that it also includes a digital media component. It will actually capture your cell phone signature as you drive by this cell phone and will retarget you for a potential ad later that day. So if you are driving by the billboard, it will capture your cell phone signal. It will know, this is a potential commuter. And as a result, later that night, if you're looking for sports scores or wherever you might happen to go, there are ads that pop up there. Well, this ad might be one of those. If you're a person who stays at home and is not driving in, your cell phone is not going to be captured, and so you're not going to be added that ad. So the idea is we want to do a broad campaign, but we want to target commuters who are driving and who are rethinking their habits. So that is a brief explanation as to what we're thinking and where the money comes from, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner.
What came to my mind while you were making this presentation was the possibility of also using the message boards that DOT has put on the roads. I wonder if they might also flash, interested in a van pool.
No, that's a really good idea, and I will tell you, we've not explored that, but we certainly will now. So I don't know what the possibility of that is, but happy to undertake that conversation.
Great.
Mr. Chair. John.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
And I love the idea of going out and trying to market the van pool thing. I think the timing, the later in the spring, and you got that COVID that you're still dealing with. And so that challenge of the psyche of the individual, is it safer in my car, even though it's maybe not as economical for me to drive safely as opposed to being in a van with other people that I don't know. As the vaccine hopefully gets out, I think it'll be a much more effective opportunity for marketing. I love the idea, though. I love the idea of the regional reach. It's a regional initiative. It's regional funds, and so to be able to use that marketing in the region. The effectiveness of the Clear Channel with the cell phone, though scary, is very effective. And so I think that's pretty good as well. The question I had for you is, who's going to be doing the creative for the billboards?
The creative has not been done yet, but it will be done by Clear Channel, and it's part of the proposal. So we have a chance to discuss what that will be in December and actually into January. The campaign is not targeted to begin until February. We may actually push that off a little bit given the COVID situation here. I would like to do the campaign probably prior to the summer break, because we do know, regardless of COVID, there's less people on the roads there. But it's an 8-week campaign, and quite frankly, there's flexibility in it. You're approving the expenditure, but I would tell you, based on what I know about COVID now, which we didn't know several weeks ago, I would probably make that a mid-March or a late March type of thing into Memorial Day. So I would push that back. That's not contractual. We can work with Clear Channel on doing that and pushing that back a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. Looks like they gave you a good deal, a good value. So a great presentation.
Thank you.
Great. So we don't have the actual proposal to bring before the committee or the full board yet in terms of the numbers and approval.
We do. You have in your packet the actual Clear Channel proposal with the number there is for your consideration. They're also they provided a few, I think, examples of billboard placements. They were very strategic. The campaign is going to include 10 digital billboards strategically placed on highways. There are also some other billboards thrown in because you want to combine your frequency with your reach. The idea being that the message needs to play over and over a few times too. So they have proposed that what we can still, once we, if we agree to move forward with this at this dollar amount, the creative part of it would be what's to be decided, and that is included in this. So there would be no additional expense to create.
Yeah, can you just go over the dollar amounts for us here?
Yes, I will. The total expenditure is $101,500. That is for an 8-week campaign that right now is targeted to begin right after Super Bowl. Rates for billboards are a little higher. They're assuming that there's a Super Bowl, and the ad rates are a little different because you have national media then. But the idea was, once we get past the Super Bowl, and I think even when we get into March, rates are a little bit lower. We get more value for that. So $101,500. That comes from a $131,000 budgeted line item in our fiscal year budget.
Mr. Chair, follow-up question.
Yes, Commissioner Mitten.
Tell me about how you're going to measure the effectiveness of the campaign.
We'll measure the effectiveness on the campaign by inquiries that we get through, the website, and certainly we'll measure it by the number of people who are interested in engaging with the van pool. So people who may engage with us and call us in one activity, we're going to be able to measure that because we kind of know what the baseline is and what normal activity is. Well, from the app or the web pages, that as people engage with that, we measure those metrics. So we're certainly able to see what the engagement is. Ultimately, the call to action is to get people into van pools. So the real deliverable here, the KPI, if you will, is going to be how many people are using van pools. And if we can increase van pools by a certain number, we will know what the success of the campaign is.
I think it's a great idea, and I think if the creative will provide for the branding of TBarta as a whole, that many eyes, getting that many impressions with TBarta's brand is going to be good. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a 2 for 1.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, Rich McLean.
Yes, Rich.
Hey, thank you. First off, I'm just going to reiterate what Commissioner Mitten said. I think this is a nice campaign going forward. Your comments about branding of TBarta, I think, is a secondary benefit there too. But just my kudos out to Chris for putting together a great discussion here for this campaign we're pursuing here. One question I do have for Chris, and you covered it very nicely, saying, "Hey, we'll look at pushing this to March, maybe April timeframe." Have we seen a significant decrease in van pool usage or not?
I can't speak specifically to those numbers. I can tell you in speaking to Commute with Enterprise just this week, they said that there's an uptick and they've actually bringing a few more van pools online. But I'd be speaking out of turn if I was telling you exactly where we are with the van pool program right now. I know there's been some challenges, I think, in the number of people who are in there. So I don't want to speak to that, but I will tell you, Commute with Enterprise says they see an uptick in interest. So there is some new interest that's out there right now.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Welcome. One just procedural question I have, Chris. Obviously, we don't have a quorum here today to formally approve this. The contract can be put off until the next board meeting will be in January then. So we're not having a decision.
I would be okay with that. Obviously, I don't think that is a big issue. Initially, we thought we were going to start in February, but given the COVID situation, we may want to push that off. So if you weren't considering it until January, I think we'd probably be okay.
As long as the vendor doesn't have an issue with that.
I'd have to go back to them, but I don't foresee that. I mean, they're very interested in working with us, as you can understand. So I'm sure we'll be able to work something out.
Yeah, I would, based on the questions here, assume there is a consensus, obviously, to bring up at the board and then defer a final vote, both on the committee level and on the board level, till we have a quorum.
Great.
Thanks for the great
Appreciate
presentation.
that. Thank you.
Next item up is other business. Is there any other business to come before the committee? Future meeting subjects, I will assume we're just going to have the usual financial reports and so forth going forward. David, any other key items that we will have in Finance Committee coming up that we need to be aware of? Okay, none being heard. The committee is in adjournment and we'll wait for the board meeting in a few minutes. Thanks.
30 seconds.
We'll go right to the policy meeting, Chair, if that's okay with you.
I'm sorry, policy, yes.
Right. We'll go ahead and call the November Policy Committee meeting into order for 13 November 2020. Jennifer, can you go ahead and do it? Call to order.
Yes. Jim Holton.
Here.
Cliff Manuel. Rich McLean.
Here.
Commissioner Starkey.
Here.
Commissioner Bellamy will not be joining us. Commissioner Mitten.
Here.
We do not have a quorum, but we can go ahead and
All right. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And I believe you're going to take care of the public comments also.
Yes. So normally we would have 2 ways of sending in public comments, but today we have 3. So as always, you can email your public comment to publiccomment@tbarta.com no later than 30 minutes prior to the meeting start time, and your comments will be read into the record. You can also phone in at 1-267-866-099 with access code 1234-351876 30 minutes prior to the meeting. You will first speak to a staff member, then be able to provide public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes when recognized by the chairman. This public comment period will be extended for up to 30 minutes. And then also here in person, people wishing to address the board are requested to complete a comment card and give it to staff. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and the public comment period can be extended for up to 30 minutes. And we do not have any public comments for this meeting.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Next item up is consent agenda. Of course, the only item on the consent agenda is the committee meeting. Seeing we don't have a quorum now, we'll move this to the next committee meeting. Moving on to item number 4, which is information items. We do have 2 information items on the docket here. The first one is transit working proclamations. And let me see if Chris is Chris Dionisio there? There we go.
Hey, Rich.
Thank you, Chris.
Christy Nuttes with TBarta. It's good to be here in person as well. In October, the TBarta Citizens Advisory Committee recommended that TBarta recognize the transit agencies in the 5-county region for their response to the COVID-19 health emergency. The staff is recommending that the governing board issue a proclamation that publicly recognizes the efforts of the transit agencies in the 5-county region, the bus in Hernando County, PCPT in Pasco, PSTA in Pinellas, Hart in Hillsborough, and MCAT in Manatee, and continuing to provide essential transportation services during the COVID-19 pandemic.
So we can't vote on that. Is that an action item? That's information item.
It's an action item.
It is?
Yeah, it should have been, and this is Rich again, it should have been an action item, but seeing how we don't have a quorum, we cannot vote on it. But I do believe everybody would be in favor of it. Hopefully you've reviewed and all those proclamations out there.
Any questions? Absolutely.
Well,
I'm just noting that in my packet, I have one for Hillsborough, Manatee, and Pinellas, but there isn't one for Pasco. Is there one for Pasco?
Yeah, there is.
There's one for
I don't know why I don't have it.
There's one for all 5.
Okay, it might just be that we printed it out wrong, but I only have 3 in my packet.
Now, just procedurally, didn't we approve the proclamations before, and these are just following up on them?
I'm not sure if we voted on it last month or not. We discussed it and we said that we would bring it to the committee and board this month for consideration.
Okay, so it's, all right.
So with that said, Chair, it looks like we'll hold off on voting on this until the next committee meeting. And of course, we'll vote to move that to the full board.
Okay.
All right, the next item for information is planning projects update. I've got Brian Psa already there with you. Are you there, Brian? There you go.
I'm here.
Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. At the last policy committee meeting, I gave a report on several planning studies that staff is looking into, and I just wanted to give you an update on where things stand with that. The first one is the annual update of the regional TDP. All transit agencies in Florida are required to do an annual update. It's really more of a progress report. It's going to be due September 1st. Because of the small dollar amount involved, it's likely we'll execute this through our general services consultant and try and get that work started in January so that we can have it done by September 1st. The next planning study is the Gondola feasibility study. The board directed staff to coordinate with Ford Pinellas on this, and that's what we've been doing. Last week, Whit Blanton and I spoke to the Clearwater City Council. They were the last group of stakeholders that we needed to speak to before we move forward on a scope of work. Whit and I had already met with Mayor Kreisman and his staff. We met with both Chambers of Commerce and with FDOT, and there does seem to be broad interest in moving forward with a gondola study that looks at 2 possible projects. One in St. Petersburg that would connect Tropicana Field to the pier, and then another one in Clearwater that would connect downtown with Clearwater Beach. As I mentioned at the last policy committee meeting, the staff recommendation is that we put the study out to bid. The goal is to have this RFP on the street by January. We won't know the exact cost of the study until after the proposals come in, but it is very likely that this study will use up a large amount of the remaining funds in the Innovative Transit earmark, because that's the source of money that we're planning on using for this study. The next planning study that we discussed was the HART Comprehensive Operations Analysis. HART is undertaking this COA to identify service that can be implemented in the next 2 to 3 years. However, 2 of the tasks in their scope of work are currently unfunded because they were meant to be funded through the transportation surtax, which is held up in the Supreme Court. The approximate cost for those 2 tasks it's approximately $110,000. We have approximately $249,000 set aside in our operations grant for consultants and contracted services. This coming Monday, staff, we're going to have a meeting with FDOT and HART to discuss the logistics of how we could go about paying the the invoices from Hart's Consultant. And then the last study I need to give you an update on is the 34th Street Smart Corridor Study. This was a collaboration that we were trying to make happen with PSTA, using some of the leftover money from the Transit Innovative Earmark. However, based on feedback that we got from FDOT Central Office, who reviewed the draft scope of work, this study would not be an eligible expense because it includes design and engineering. The earmark is specifically meant for planning, and FDOT treats design and engineering differently than it does planning. FDOT warned us that if we were to move forward with this study, there's a good chance that the consultant invoices would be rejected for payment. And so for that reason, we are not going to move forward with this study. That is my update, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Rich, I think.
Oh, yeah. Rich, can you see me?
I can. Go right ahead,
Okay.
Chairman.
So how much is left in our grant?
Are you talking about from the Innovative Transit Technology? We have approximately $779,000 remaining.
Okay.
And like I said, we don't know what the cost is going to be for the gondola study. We can only take a kind of a best guess estimate. We're thinking somewhere in the 500,000 range. It could be more, it could be less, but we won't know until the proposals come in.
So just kind of thinking out loud, and I see the secretaries here, with the advancement of Tavistock's plan with Lilium, I think I'm saying that right. I'm wondering if we want to use some of that money towards some kind of partnership with District 5 and that program and see how we can be very engaged in that. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't reserve some of that money, since this is something that's real and moving forward. And so thoughts.
Some of it wasn't it? When our prior.
We used some of the money to explore, right? All these different.
We spent, I have to do the math. It was $221,000 to do the study that we wrapped up in July.
Yeah. So if they're planning on flying, what I read was from Orlando to Tampa, where are they planning on going? Where is their heliport or vertiport here in Tampa going to be? And what do we need to do to be ready for that and maybe extend it further into our region? So I'm wondering if we should reserve some funds to look at that. And I'd love to know if our district has been approached by District 5.
Is it question directed to me or to the?
Kind of Secretary Gwynn.
I'm not sure. I'd have to check. I'm not.
You probably have to go to the microphone. Sorry.
Yes, I'm not aware, and I know Katina, I don't know if you're aware of any approach we've had.
We have not, sir, but we can talk about that.
Yeah, we can look into it, but I don't think we've actually had any coordination between us and District 5 on this.
So earlier in our one of our other subcommittees, we discussed the idea of collaboration with that district and I don't know if the district's even involved in that, but we definitely want to look at collaborating between the other counties on the corridor and seeing if we can become a hub for this innovative transportation.
Yeah, I'd have to check with District 5. I don't know if they're involved in it or not. Just don't know anything about it right now.
My understanding, Commissioner, I think Lilium has approached a number of private, vendors for landing pads and also the Tampa International Airport. There were negotiations with them, but I think our initial discussion with them that we would be sort of synergistic partners and so forth and help them, strategic partners, and helping them locate some of those. So it's a point well taken in terms of what kind of study dollars we could specifically use for that purpose, if any, Chris, to further that.
And as a reminder, and Brian can give you an update on this as well, the partnership that TBarta has with NASA and the work that they are performing on the modeling of identifying potential vertiports throughout the region, that's ongoing. That is being done right now. The effort that Lilium would need from TBarta is to help identify potential landing sites and that is what we are doing with NASA now. So if you want to provide an update on that.
Right, so the work is just really getting underway with NASA. We anticipate that we'll wrap it up sometime around May. What the final product will be a regional model that NASA has customized. For starters, we're doing it for Hillsborough County. And when they wrap it up, they will basically hand the model over to us and to the Hillsborough MPO for them to use for their long-range transportation purposes. Commissioner Stark, getting back to your comments, if it's the wish of this board that we set aside money, a certain amount of money for something related to air taxis, the only thing I would want to bring up again is just to remind you that it can only be used for planning. We cannot use it for anything related to design and engineering. So that's the only restriction that we have.
Hey, Brian, this is Rich McLean. Just to make sure everybody's clear on what monies are available, it sounded like of the 700,000 that you have available, 500 of it is somewhat committed, if I'm not mistaken, for the Gondola project. And then as I recall, you mentioned another 100,000 for the heart study. So if I'm doing the math there, there's very little money left on that grant. Am I correct?
Well, just to clarify, at this point, the pot of money that we're thinking about for the heart study would be coming out of our operations grant.
Okay, very good. So total dollars we have available, given that we're pursuing the Gondola project or looking at pursuing the Gondola project, would be around how much, Chris?
Like I said, we can only take a best guess at this point. We're estimating somewhere in the 500 to 600,000 range. And like I said, we have 779,000 remaining. So let's say worst case, we would have about $179,000 left over.
Yeah, and Commissioner Starkey, I wanted to make sure we were all aware of that as we look at this, that we have other projects we're looking at. And so making sure everybody's kind of level set with what we're really talking about in terms of funding available if we decide to go this route.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Brian.
All right.
Okay. Next item is discussions and any action items. Of course, we can't take action items. Any discussions?
None.
Seeing none. Other business and future meeting subjects. We'll pursue those in a future date. Adjournment. It looks like our next policy committee meeting is on the 22nd of January. So if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting and give you some time back prior to the vote.
Thanks.
Okay. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
No, it's funny because.
She's good.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Commissioner Starkey, can you lead us in the pledge since we're meeting?
Yes, I will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Jennifer, please call the roll.
Jim Holton,
Here.
Cliff Manuel,
Here.
Commissioner Long will not be joining us. Mayor Castor, Mayor Kreisman, Rich McLean,
Here.
Commissioner Kemp, Commissioner Starkey,
Here.
Commissioner Bellamy will not be joining. Commissioner Mitten,
Here.
Commissioner Seal is absent. Secretary Gwynn,
Here?
and I believe we have Nicole Mills filling in for Secretary Nandiam. Are you on the line, Nicole? We do not have a quorum, but we can go into proceedings.
Okay, thank you for that. Before we get started with public comment, I want to thank Pasco County and Commissioner Starkey for hosting us today. We always appreciate coming up here. You've got such a great facility, and it's fortunately a very nice, easy drive from St. Petersburg. So
Yes, it is.
welcome that, and looking forward to some transit back and forth as well. So I can get on a bus or a train or a helicopter to come here. So, but thanks for that, and we look forward to your reception afterwards.
Great, thank you.
Jennifer, please give the PSA for public comment.
So persons wishing to address the board can do so in 3 ways. You can email your comments to publiccomment@tbarta.com no later than 30 minutes prior to the meeting start time, and your comments will be read into record. You may also call to speak into the meeting via 1-267-866-0999 with access code 1234-351876, 30 minutes prior to the meeting. You will first speak to a staff member and then be able to provide public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes when recognized by the chairman. This public comment period will be extended for up to 30 minutes. And then, as always, in person, you are requested to complete a comment card and give it to staff. In the same way, public comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and it can also be extended up to 30 minutes if needed. We do not have any in-person comments, but we do have some emails that we did receive prior to the meeting.
Okay, please read those.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First email is from Aubrey Myrick, writing in support of Hyperloop TT. Good morning. I am writing into the TBarta November board meeting at 10 a.m. I am a senior at the University of South Florida in support of building a Hyperloop system in Tampa Bay. As I approach graduation in the spring, I must figure out where to take my talents, skills, and education acquired during Tampa. I could stay here in the Tampa Bay area, but this up-and-coming community does not have all the metropolitan features of a city that I am looking for. If Tampa were to make transportation a priority and build a Hyperloop system in the area, it would bring and keep younger generations entering the workforce into the city. This will help position Tampa Bay as a forward-thinking next-generation region and will attract the best and brightest to work in our community. A project like this, which will bring a world-renowned technology to the region, and is something we cannot reject. Rejecting this project will stifle momentum for our region and will send a message that Tampa Bay is not open to innovation. Thank you so much, Aubrey Myrick. The second public comment comes from Sabrina Wilman. Hello, I'm writing into the TBarta November board meeting at 10 a.m. I am a student at the University of South Florida, writing to voice my support for approval of a Hyperloop systems project. I currently have an hour commute to work and school, and I personally feel as though building Hyperloop transportation system will help relieve a great deal of pressure on traffic and would elevate the city by finally efficiently connecting the region from Tampa to St. Petersburg and Brandon. Rejecting a project like this would be detrimental to the growth and prosperity of our communities and would drive a lot of young talent away. That's Sabrina Wilmer. The third written email comment comes from Tadeo Torres. Spell that name Tzaitel Torres. Good morning. I'm writing to voice my support for the approval of the building of a Hyperloop system in Tampa Bay. Hyperloop is building the future of mobility by creating the world's most advanced, low-pressure, high-speed, fully sustainable, two-phase transportation system. Hyperloop TT can connect people in cities across vast distances at incredible speeds to revolutionize the way we travel. Thank you. And that is the last of the written public comments.
Okay, thank you. Any other person wishing to make public comment? Okay, thank you. I will.
Chair, this is Commissioner Kemp. Point of order. I just want to let you know I'm present. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Jennifer, that does not change.
Noted.
No.
But it doesn't change. I don't believe it changes.
Welcome. Wish you were here, Pat. Next up is recognition of John Mitten for his outstanding service. John, we have a resolution that David will read, and for that, I want to thank you personally for all the great things you've done for TBarta, and we are sad to see you leave.
Thank you.
David, you're recognized.
TBarta Resolution Number 2020-10, a resolution of appreciation for the service of Commissioner John Mitten. Whereas the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority was created by the Florida Legislature to plan, finance, construct, operate, maintain, and manage multimodal systems in Hernando, Hillsborough, Manatee, Pasco, and Pinellas counties. And whereas Commissioner Mitten was appointed by the Hernando County Board of Commissioners to represent Hernando County as one of the members of the TBarta Governing Board, a position in which he has served with distinction and dedication. And whereas Commissioner Mitten served with distinction and dedication as Vice Chairman of the Policy Committee, he also served on the Finance and Legislative Committees. During his tenure, he actively participated in framing the goals, direction, and programs of TBarta. And whereas, while always championing issues of importance to Hernando County, Commissioner Mitten has exemplified the spirit of regionalism by lending his support to improving transportation and mobility throughout the 5 counties served by TBarta, and in return, received the support of TBarta in addressing those same issues in Hernando County. And now, therefore, be it resolved by the Governing Board that the TBarta Governing Board hereby expresses its sincere appreciation to Commissioner Mitten for his service, and further, the TBarta Governing Board directs that this resolution be presented to Commissioner Mitten in public session at the board meeting on November 13th, 2020, in recognition of his dedication and valuable service to the to the Tampa Bay region. Approved and adopted by the Governing Board of TBarta on this 13th day of November 2020. Signed, Jim Holton, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank
John,
you.
please say a few words.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a privilege to be part of TBarta, and I have learned from each of you, and I thank you for that. Regional collaboration is a fascinating dynamic. And when I first got on TBarta, we had just come out of some pretty tough times. We didn't even have an executive director. And to fast forward to today to see not simply on the administrative level with staff, the professionalism, and then also the fiscal position we find ourselves in, even though we continue to fight for more recurring funding, we're in a significant better position today. And this board going forward is well positioned with TBarta to take us to the next level. And so it's been enjoyable. Thank you.
And thanks again for your service. And I'm disappointed to seeing you leave public life. Hopefully it will not be for too long. Maybe something else is in the future. So,
thank you. We'll see what God has.
Thank you. Thank you. Next up are the consent agenda items. And since we do not have a quorum, we'll have to defer those until next meeting. Next item is discussion action items, and the first is the legislative subcommittee report, and Commissioner Starkey's recognized to give back.
Good morning, and I guess I'm just gonna turn it over to Harry Glenn to give us an update. Good morning, Harry. Is Harry on? Okay, I can go to Ron, and then Back to Harry, if that works.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Mr. Member. I'll give you the state update and we can come back to Harry on the federal update. On the state update, just a couple of things. Number one, from an election standpoint, as we all know, elections are almost behind us. And I'll talk about just at the state level, we do have an elections update we'll send out to all the board members. My office will get that out later today. That'll kind of highlight what happened in the state level, but also with regards to our footprint. So we'll be sending that out to everyone. At the state level, the Florida House, Republicans picked up 5 seats, was a little bit of a surprise going into election. If you look at some of the very competitive seats, not only did the Republicans were able to hold those seats, they also picked up 5 additional seats. One over in St. Petersburg, Jennifer Webb's seat, one down in Sarasota. Representative Good seat, she, as you all know, she ran for Congress against Vern Buchanan, so that seat became open. Went over on the East Coast and 2 down in Miami. In addition, the Florida Senate, there was 2 very competitive seats, one in Orlando, one down in Miami. The Republicans held those 2 seats, and they also picked up a seat, which was a little bit of a surprise in Miami. That seat became official yesterday. The Republican nominee won that seat by 34 votes. It was in a recount, and those were made official yesterday. So in Tallahassee, Republicans will now have a majority of 78-42 in the Florida House and 24-16 in the Florida Senate. Organizational sessions next Tuesday, where new House members will be sworn in, new senators will be sworn in, and also new House and Senate leadership will be sworn in as well. At this point, it looks like from a protocol standpoint, public access will not happen for next Tuesday, and it's going to be very short in ceremony, obviously due to COVID. They have announced committee weeks. We're going to go down, and they're going back to more of a traditional calendar, which is 2 committee weeks in January, 3 in February, and session's going to start on March the 2nd. We don't know yet the protocols for committee weeks in session. We're still kind of working our way through that. We believe the House and Senate will announce kind of what access to the Capitol will look like sometime in December. We do believe there will probably be some version of limited access, but again, we're not sure what that looks like at this point. What we have done, though, is we're working with David to get something on the calendar for a couple of trips to Tallahassee. So we're working on that. As we talked with David yesterday about, we need to plan to be in Tallahassee and have a presence on behalf of TBarta. If we can't do a trip for some reason and have actual meetings at the Capitol at a minimum, we would do this. We would do some version of a virtual meeting with members of the ball delegation and House and Senate leadership as well. With regards to our legislative agenda, we are in the process of finalizing our bill sponsors for our bill, for our Enabling Act. I hope to have that wrapped up in the next couple of weeks. We can announce that at our next board meeting, and also finalizing our appropriation sponsors as well. So all of that will be done in the next couple of weeks. We'll be able to announce that hopefully, prior to our next board meeting, then have a strategy laid out where our bill, I would love to be able to position and have it submitted to bill drafting and be able to be filed sometime in January. We expect bills won't really start moving in Tallahassee until February. We want to make sure that our bill's in a position to move early during this upcoming legislative session. So I'll stop there and see if any board members have any questions or comments.
Ron, quick question, and I think this came out in the committee meeting. Obviously, our legislative agenda is again going to bring up the topic of virtual meetings with the legislature. In the meantime, today is a perfect illustration of what can happen and not have a quorum because of a pandemic, and also just coming out of a hurricane or a tropical storm / hurricane in the Tampa Bay area in the last couple of days. So we are hopeful you might be able to approach the governor's office again and talk about potentially extending or doing an optional kind of executive order where special districts, especially large regional ones, can have some flexibility in holding virtual meetings, because I think we're going to face this, TBarta is going to face this over and over again, especially if there's another wave of COVID with folks having to travel and potentially risk health matters because of the meeting requirements.
Mr. Chairman, we're happy to do that. As we talked about earlier, I would not expect any type of special, any executive order at this point for the remainder of this year. Obviously, if the numbers continue to rise, that could be something that can happen early next year. So we'll definitely talk to the governor's office and report back at our next meeting as we start talking about a little bit about next year. I think more importantly, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the legislative meeting, is, I think this does make a sound argument for why virtual meetings should be allowed for TBarta as a part of our Enabling Act. So we're obviously going to revisit that with House and Senate leadership in the governor's office, and hopefully that's something that they would be open to moving forward.
Thank you.
Ron, I have a question, Commissioner Starkey. We've seen who the House leadership is, but do we know who the Senate leadership is yet, and who will, especially the TED appropriations?
We don't know who the TED appropriations is. We do know that Senator Stargell out of Polk County is going to be the appropriations chair. That will probably be announced sometime early next week. At this point in time, we don't know who the TED appropriations chair is going to be. I know that, Clay Yarborough out of Jacksonville area has been somebody that's been mentioned. So we'll see at this point. That has not officially been announced. Typically it's somebody from North Florida. We'll see if that tradition kind of, follows. But at this point, that has not been announced.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thanks so much, Ron.
Thank you.
Do we have Harry to give our federal update?
I'm back. Sorry about that, Commissioner. I lost our internet just as it was time to speak. So thank you for coming back around. I apologize. As I mentioned at the Legislative Committee, we're in, as you all know, we're in the election period that doesn't seem to want to end. And I know you all know what's going on with the presidential side. Just as a reminder, the Senate is still undecided. That currently the Senate membership is of 50 Republicans and 48 Democrats, with 2 special elections in Georgia scheduled for January 5th. For those who just went through an election cycle, the mail-in ballots for that election go out on December 7th, and the early voting begins there on December 14th. So we have another election ahead of us, and that's an important one. That'll determine the control of the Senate. The House, believe it or not, they're still counting votes in the House too. There are 13 House seats that haven't been called yet. Right now, the membership in the House is 219 Democrat and 203 Republican, 13 undecided. So far, that's a net gain of 7 Republican House seats. So the current speaker will have a little bit smaller majority to be working with in a new Congress. So that'll be a little bit trickier for her. Legislatively, you may have been seeing that, as you know, since our last meeting, that there was no final resolution on a COVID relief bill before the election. Senator McConnell has said that he would like to, and the speaker said they'd like to get a COVID relief bill done before the end of the year. I know TBarta benefited from the CARES Act, received some support, important support in the CARES Act. We're not sure where that's going to go. The White House and the Secretary of the Treasury, who's been leading the negotiations for the Republicans in the White House on the past COVID relief efforts, has stepped aside at the direction of the president, and they've left the next round of negotiations with the speaker to Senator McConnell. Senator McConnell and the speaker haven't met yet. There were some back and forth press events yesterday where there was less optimism about getting a COVID relief bill before the end of the year, but they haven't given up hope, and we'll continue to monitor that for you. The big sticking point is the Senate. Senator McConnell wants to do a smaller version of a COVID relief bill. He calls it a more targeted bill in the $500 billion range. The speaker still would like to do a larger scale bill in the $2 trillion range. And so that's a pretty big gap to close in the couple weeks that they have to do it. So we'll see how that goes. That effort could very well get merged into the end of the year budget process that the Congress is engaging in now. As you may know, the federal government's operating under a continuing funding resolution that expires now on December 11th. That keeps the government open and operating. They'll have to do something before December 11th to keep that going. The current thinking is there are 12 regular appropriations bills that Congress does every year. None of them have become law yet. The Senate reported out all 12 of its versions of the bill on Tuesday. And the hope is that they'll take as many of those as they can and include them in another continuing resolution before December 11th to get most of the government funded and keep the government operating without closure. Transportation would likely be one of those. It's one of the less controversial bills, and so that would be good. The House and the Senate are pretty close to agreement on most of the provisions that are of interest to you all, which would be continuation of the Build Grant program, which is a $1 billion infrastructure program, a competitive program. That's a good program that someday you may want to apply for. Of the transit programs, the low-no bus grant programs, the bus and bus facility grant programs, the training and research programs are all funded at levels pretty similar in the House and Senate bills. So I think that's all a good sign. Both the House and Senate continue to support the ferry grant program, which is of interest, I think, to the Tampa Bay area too. So we'll continue to monitor that. Hopefully at the next call, we'll have more good news, definitive news for you on that. The other thing I wanted to make mention of is there was a meeting yesterday of some transportation-related interest groups, and one of the president-elect's key advisors on transportation, a gentleman named John Picari, who was a deputy secretary of transportation under President Obama, spoke and indicated that the president-elect would like to have an infrastructure stimulus bill through the Congress within the first 100 days of his administration. And he received positive feedback from both Republicans and Democrats to those comments. So I think that's a good sign. Not quite sure how broad that bill will be, but it certainly will include transportation and transit initiatives, which I think is good for you all. Obviously, the key sticking point continues to be how to pay for that with transportation revenues down. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that for you. And what may be included in that bill is potentially the reauthorization of the FAST Act, which, as you know, is the 5-year highway transit authorization bill that Congress does every 5 years. And that's important because that'll set the policies for transit programs over the next 5 years. So we will continue to monitor that and make sure that you're aware of all the opportunities that may be presented to you by that legislation. The last thing I would say is just as a reminder from the local election, we will have one new Congressman, Scott Franklin, from the Tampa Bay area, your service area. Already have talked to him about TBarta and the work you're doing, and he wants to learn more about that. He was a Lakeland city commissioner, so I think he's aware of your work. But we will continue to reach out to him. He may very well become a member of the House Transportation Committee. It's one of the things he's looking at, and that would be helpful. That would give us 2 in your area. Dan Webster is a senior member of that committee, so that would be helpful there. So that's what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Quick question, Harry. What are the prospects of in another round of COVID funding, similar to CARES Act, for us getting additional rounds of money next year?
So the House passed HEROES Act that was passed way back in May included $32 billion for transit relief. There's significant problems, as you can well imagine, in some of the larger cities that have, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, that have tremendous reliance on transit. So there is pressure there. There really has been no discussion about specific items to include in the next COVID bill. I see that New York is continuing to make that case that they need help. So I think there's a good opportunity. And what I would say about COVID relief is they may get a smaller version of a bill this year, and then also want to look at doing a larger version of the bill next year with the new administration, the new Congress. So there may be, if it doesn't succeed this time for transit relief in the smaller COVID bill, there may be an opportunity early in the new year to do that. Obviously, we mentioned on the previous call that the president-elect is a big believer in transit. He was a train rider. He rode the train every day from Washington back and forth to Wilmington. So he believes and he understands the importance of transit and transportation programs. We'll continue to look at that. There is an issue too, and they need to do some COVID relief between now and the end of the year to support the vaccine delivery program. There's also pressure from communities to extend some of the availability of CARES Act dollars. Those dollars will expire at the end of December unless Congress does something between now and the end of the year. And so the thinking is, even if they can't provide new dollars, they'll extend the length of time that the current dollars can be spent. So that's another provision they're looking at. So, Mr. Chairman, we'll continue to watch that and let you know how it goes.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Starkey, does that complete your report?
Yes, that completes our committee report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Next up is the Finance Committee. Commissioner Long could not be with us today due to a business in Pinellas County, so I'll give that report. I now recognize Melanie Williams for the updated financials.
Good morning. So included in your packet is the financials for the fiscal year ending September 2020 and October 2020. The fiscal year ending 2020 ended in September, includes a draft. The final report will go out once we get the financials audited, but I did want to go over some key highlights for the end of that fiscal year. So the net surplus through September, we had of $184,000, which was $8,500 over the budget amount of $176. The revenues were 2.2 under budget, along with the expenses of 2.2. The revenues were due to the timing of the PD&E technology study and the use of the federal dollars, including the STP and the 5307 funds. Going over to the balance sheet, the accounts receivable balance for the end of the fiscal year 2020 was approximately $2.1 million, along with the accounts payable of $1.6 million. At the end of the fiscal year 2020, we had approximately $112,000 in the bank. Going over to October, which is the first month of the new fiscal year 2021, the month ending, we had a net surplus of $500,000, which is about $22,000, over the budgeted amount of $512. What makes up the difference is the revenues were under budgeted by $400,000 due to the timing of the expenditures for the PD&E and technology. In the expense category, we were about $466 under budget, and this was also due to the timing due to the expenditures. In October, our accounts receivable balance was $2.3 million, along with the accounts payable balance was $1.3 million. At the end of October, in our bank, we had approximately $109,000. So that wraps up the highlights for the last 2 months for September and October. Any questions?
Thank you. Members, questions? Thanks for that great report. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're going to, Chris Jadek is going to brief us on the commuter services ad campaign.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a request for approval of an expenditure of $101,500 for an advertising campaign to support the regional van pool program. I recognize we don't have a quorum today, so I present this as information for your consideration. I want to talk about two things today. First, where the money would come from for this expenditure, and then what we would do with the money. First, very important to know, as we're being very fiscally conservative, that this money comes from a grant that specifically is to support the regional van pool program. This is what we call the G1467 program, the FHWA Surface Transportation Program. And I read directly from the grant itself. The purpose of this agreement, quote, is to expand the regional van pool program. So very important, I want to make sure the board understands that these are not operating dollars, these are not CARES fund, these certainly are not local match dollars, but this comes from a grant specifically designed to promote regional van pool services. The grant itself has a total of $350,000. 75% of that is specifically for marketing of the van pool program. We have budgeted $131,000 of that in the fiscal year TBarta budget right now. And so this expenditure, roughly 75% of that comes from that budgeted line item. The second thing I want to talk about is what are we going to do with the money? How can we support the regional van pool program, especially in this era of COVID? Do we want a digital media campaign? Do we want to do newspapers or radio ads? The thinking is that we want to target drivers when they're driving and probably most frustrated about their commute. And what better way to do that than billboards on interstates? The idea being that when you're in your car right then, you're thinking about your commute. You might be not driving as quickly as you want to, and that billboard is right there. So billboards seem to be an ideal way to target long distance commuters who are those who we're looking at. We're not looking at people who are driving 5-10 miles an hour to work, but people who are driving longer distances, 15 or 20 miles. There are 3 companies in this area that are really qualified to provide that type of media: Lamar, Outdoor, and Clear Channel. We reached out and spoke to all of them and received proposals from them. The Clear Channel proposal is superior because of the amount of deliverables that it does give us. It gives us more impressions overall. It's also a very strategic campaign. We worked with them on where the placement of these billboards would be. We want to make sure that the billboards are in areas where you're most likely to capture people who are commuting long distance. So there might be some billboards inside the city that are, nice to have, but really what you want are billboards that are on the county lines, down I-275 or coming up 75 from Manatee County. And so we've been able to work with Clear Channel to strategically select 10 digital billboards that we would use. There are also other billboards that would be in rotation in this campaign as well. This also includes a digital media component as well, too. As you know, we're on our phones, we're on our computers, and there are ads that pop up there. What's really nice about this campaign is that it also will target people who drive by these billboards for those ads. So you can only have so many ads out there. The idea being, if I drive by a billboard that is promoting commuter services, there's a chance that I'm a commuter and I'm the person we want to message to. The technology is now advanced enough that Clear Channel can capture your signature on your phone. And then if you were later on that night, let's say you're looking for sports scores or you're otherwise on the web, a place where pop-up ads would be, you would be subjected perhaps to one of those ads that would come up and would give you the message and would kind of, reiterate what we're trying to say. If you're a person who works at home, you would not get that ad because likely you're not traveling on the highways. And so you're not really the target that we're looking for this campaign. The campaign is scheduled to begin after the Super Bowl. That would be February. But in our conversations with the Finance Committee, we actually talked about pushing that back a little bit. Given our COVID situation, it remains unclear. But I will tell you that we do know that interest in the van pool program is increasing, that the roads are becoming, more congested. I will add a little more information at the Finance Committee. I think it was Rich McLean asked me what the van pool numbers are. I did not have that information then. But thanks to Sue Ebner and our crack TBarta staff, I do now. So let me provide those to you. In February, we had 172 van pools in service. That was pre-COVID. Our low point was in April where there were 137. That was our lowest vehicle count. I think that's roughly 45 less. But it has picked up since then. And the most recent numbers in September are 150. So in talking with Commute with Tampa Bay and talking with our staff, I do know the businesses are talking about this and people are reconsidering their commute now. So this is a good time to get the TBarta message out in front of us. The campaign itself, as I mentioned, was an 8-week campaign designed to begin in February. I think we actually would probably push that back a little bit, but we do want to try to target people in the spring as they start to reconsider their commute. Perhaps it would be a March to Memorial Day type of campaign. We don't recommend running the campaign over summer, regardless of COVID, just because summer driving habits are different. But we do think this is a good time as people start to rethink what they want to do for them to consider a TBarta van pool. And with that, I am open to any questions.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Starkey.
During your presentation, I wondered if it might be possible to also use the message boards that DOT has to promote the van pool. The ones where you put silver alert and things like that. So
I can check. I know we have certain protocols on what we can and can't put on there, but I can certainly check to see if that's an allowable message.
Great. Thank you.
We welcome that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you,
This is Commissioner Kemp.
Yes, I'll let Commissioner. I recognize Commissioner Mitten first, and I'll recognize you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mentioned it in the committee and I think it's a great idea. I love the regional approach, and if we can take this opportunity, you're using, as you mentioned, fiscal conservatism. You take grant money assigned to marketing and you're applying it on a regional basis, which is great. If we can get the brand recognition from this project, I think it's going to bode well for us in the future. So get those out there, get those hits, get that logo, get that brand out there. And the van pools, I'm surprised the van pool numbers didn't go down farther. I'm actually impressed that 130 was our low point because I would have thought it would have been significantly lower. So to get it all the way back up to 150 something right now, I think we're well on our way. So this is a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Kemp.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. This money is federal highway funding money?
This is the FHWA Surface Transportation Program that is administered through FDOT, and I defer to FDOT as specifically where those dollars come from. I'm not as familiar with that. The FHWA Surface Transportation Program.
Yeah, there's more specific than that. I'm not sure I have. I don't know if Katina, you have any. I think you have to come to the mic.
Katina, could you come to the mic, please? Thanks.
Trying to stay out of the camera.
Hey.
Good morning. I do apologize. The grant that is being talked about is the STP funding. TBarta had applied for van pool, regional van pool funding through the Hillsborough County MPO about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's on the priorities list, and that's the grant that you're talking about right now.
Okay, has it that kind of funding been used for other programs? Like, what are the possibilities?
Commissioner, it's on the priorities list. You would have to talk to the MPO staff on that. I did not see the actual application. There's an application process, and then there's a selection.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to also, I was really interested, and I'm glad someone asked about the update on the van pool. I'm going to go back to that, so I don't think, but so you said 130 at low point and 170 now or so?
The numbers were at a high point 172 in February, 137 in April, 150 in September, the most recent numbers, and we'll have October numbers in about a week.
I'm more concerned of whether people are just riding a van alone, even though it's a van pool program, and what numbers we have for the number of people that, because I think it would be unsafe for people to not be going alone. So I don't understand how that's operating. And do you have the numbers of people that are in, and does it still require 5 to 15 people, or what? How does that work now?
Unfortunately, I don't have that information. I can get that for you. I do believe there were lower numbers in the van pool, so that is a good point. I don't have that specific information, but I'd go back to our community services team and get that for you.
I'd appreciate that, because I really don't see where the van pool at this time is a program that could be of a lot of value for us, or for ridership, and so I'd like to have those numbers. That'd be great. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, none being heard. Thank you, Chris, for that great report.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the Finance Committee report, unless there are any other questions from members. If not, I will recognize Rich McLean for the Policy Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, we the one item on the list here is the Transit Workers Proclamation. This is proclamations recognizing the 5 transit agencies within our region for their work during COVID-19. Because we did not have a quorum at the board, these are not coming forward to this meeting right now. This is information only. I believe everybody's got those in their package. Once again, it recognizes the great work that the transit agencies did in COVID-19 actions and activities throughout this period. So we will look at the next board to bring this forward to the full board, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll defer reading of the proclamations. David, I think, was going to read them, but we'll defer reading until we approve them at the appropriate board meeting then.
Yeah, agree. Thank you, Chair.
Anything else? Any questions for Rich? Okay, next up is the chairman's report, and I'll be brief. Want to especially thank staff today for an excellent meeting. It's hard to transition from a pandemic and a Zoom setting to real meetings again, and this has been pulled off very, very well, and thank you. And again, thanks to Commissioner Starkey and Pasco County for hosting us here. We went very smoothly today and seamlessly, and we appreciate your efforts here. That concludes my report. I'll now recognize David for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I'm happy to announce that the Florida Commission for Transportation Disadvantaged awarded funds for year 1 of TD Tampa Bay. This is that service that we partnered on with USERV that will allow TD eligible customers to travel between counties throughout the 5-county region. We're already promoting the program, which will begin service on December 1st, and we're coordinating with Qatar on the annual report that will support the request for continued funding in year 2. Secondly, I want to announce that we received 2 awards from the Hillsborough County Planning Commission for Envision 2030. The first is an award of merit in the planning category for our regional transit approach to improving mobility options, access to jobs, and enhancing the quality of life for residents in Hillsborough County. They see it as a robust plan that can serve as a model for future projects. The second was an award of excellence in the participation category for the public engagement campaign and research used in gathering public input throughout the planning process. The judges felt we provided maximum exposure and opportunities for the public to offer input into the plan's development and felt the plan represents the needs of the entire Hillsborough community. Like with the FPTA award last month, we're honored to get some recognition for the plan. And again, I thank staff and the Tyndale Oliver team for all the hard work they put into this project. Next, I wanted to announce that we filled our commuter services manager position. Ken Bowden joined our team on Monday, and I'm excited to introduce him this morning. Ken, if you want to give everybody a wave. Ken comes to us with experience managing a similar program in Denver, and we look forward to the knowledge he brings to Tampa Bay. So please join me in welcoming Ken Bowden this morning. And lastly, I want to mention that TBarta now has a podcast, which is currently available for download from iTunes and Google Play, and is also available on our website. Episode 1 is complete, and we're planning others, which will involve transportation-themed information, highlighting various people, agencies, programs, projects, and services throughout the region. And a big thanks to Chris Jadek for taking that idea and making that a reality. Future meeting topics remain intermodal centers and express service from downtown St. Pete to the airport. And we're also planning another regional rapid transit update, along with a presentation from FDOT on their Safe Trip Transportation Management Plan. Birthday wishes this month to Commissioner Long. I know she's not here, but she had a November birthday. And since we don't have a meeting in December, Mayor Castor, happy birthday to both of them. Our next meeting will be in January on Friday, the 22nd in Manatee County. Again, we are off in December. And unless there are any questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you, David. Members, any questions for David? Okay, thanks again for that report. We'll move on to presentations now, and the first is Whisk Aero Air Taxi Manufacturers Overview. Dan Dalton, you're recognized.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Excellent. So I'm Dan Dalton. I'm the Vice President of Global Partnerships for Whisk Aero. So in that role, I oversee all of our federal government interactions to include the FAA, NASA, and others, as well as state and local governments to include city engagements such as this. We also cover down on go-to-market partnerships. So all those companies that would be, existing with existing customers who would like to offer their customers our services, and then also technical partnerships. So, it's a small job, but somebody's got to do it. So my background, I'm an aerospace engineer by trade and commercially rated land and seaplane pilot. So, I just want to kind of touch really quickly on Mr. Glenn's comment. I'm glad he raised it regarding the President-elect's Transportation Advisor, Mr. Bakari's comments. The fact that there is going to be this large push for technologies that really enable not only emerging technologies, but promote equality and address climate change. I think these are all going to be critical in the future as new infrastructure bills and whatnot are pushed forward. So it's a really exciting time to be in electric aviation, and look forward to presenting this to you. So next slide, please. So at Whisk, our mission is really to focus on delivering that safe everyday flight for everyone. We really do this with an underpinning of safety as the core of everything that we do. Next slide, please. So we have, roughly 300 people or so based around the world, and they focus on everything from, as it says, engineering, manufacturing, flight tests, as well as business operations. We have our headquarters here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, as well as an outpost in New Zealand, and then another set in Atlanta. So all of these really come together to provide that kind of international understanding of what it takes to be involved in electric aviation. We have over 120 patents, as it says there. Those are largely, relative to our competitors. This is 2 to 3 times more than most others in the industry. And then, back in 2019 or so, we were actually established by established as a joint venture called WISC, but that was actually started by the Boeing company and a company called Kitty Hawk, which finds its roots in Google. So with these two kind of investors, if you will, that created the joint venture called WISC, we have the tremendous commercial potential from 100 years of aircraft design and manufacturing, partnered with a fantastic product team that really looks to be innovative and think about the future of electric aviation. Next slide, please. So this is our Cora aircraft. It's a 2-passenger aircraft, and it's highly automated and operates under the supervision and direction of a remote pilot. Our future plans are then to go to full autonomy, by which the aircraft actually does most of the aviating and the navigating on its own. And then we would obviously communicate with it as well. So the key thing about Cora that we've started with from the beginning is safety. And so with that in mind, it's extremely redundant. So in terms of its redundancy of batteries, propulsion, and avionics, it's also extremely reliable. We've done over 1,400 flight tests that we can talk about. And it just goes to show that the aircraft is actually extremely redundant and reliable in many different ways. And then last but not least, certainly is the safety. So for example, not only do we have redundancy and reliability, but we also incorporate things like a ballistic parachute system for the entire aircraft to ensure that it is able to, if anything should go wrong, we're kind of triply or quadruply redundant in being able to have that ballistic parachute on board. So some kind of quick specs. This is our 5th generation of aircraft, actually. We've been doing this for about 10 years. As I mentioned, it's 2 passengers. It is all electric. So it uses batteries on board the aircraft to operate those 12 lift fans that you see there. And then once it gets into the hover mode, it then has a pusher fan in the back, a propeller, to drive the aircraft forward. So it does cruise on the wing. It's like a kind of a Cessna or a Cirrus or something, kind of a general aviation aircraft in that sense, versus a helicopter. Let's go to the next slide, actually, because there's a great video of the aircraft. Hopefully we can get this video to work. Perfect. So this is actually in one of our bases here in California. Yeah, that was the aircraft taking off vertically, as you can see. Each of those 12 motors is driving. We can actually lose one of those motors or a couple of those motors before we actually have a critical event. So it's actually, as I mentioned, extremely redundant. Then it cruises out horizontally and then comes back to land safely vertically again. So can do about 100 miles an hour and flies somewhere on the order of 1,500 to 5,000 feet above the ground. Next slide, please. So really, why electric aviation, and more importantly, why urban air mobility? So when we look at the numbers, they're pretty staggering, actually. So globally, as it says, 210 hours lost due to congestion in cities, as well as the fact that most people are actually heading to move into cities, which obviously makes this a lot more challenging and only increases the concerns around congestion. More importantly, there in Tampa Bay, we're seeing that, based on a study that Boston University conducted, 55% increase in CO2 emissions from cars since 1990. So over the last 30 years, we're seeing already 50% increases. And then you've got the 1.2 million hours per day that folks are spending commuting back and forth each day, which obviously is something really important for you, as obviously with things from van commuter programs and these sorts of activities. It's really important to kind of think about what the future looks like in terms of how to address these challenges. And the long and the short is that ground infrastructure just cannot keep up with this. And so we really need to think about what are those new alternatives. And we believe that alternative is in the sky. Next slide, please. So really the question now is, if you believe that the challenges are ahead of us in terms of increased congestion, more time spent on the ground in traffic, so why focus on urban air mobility now, and more importantly, electric aviation? So the fact of the matter is we now have the technologies that we've always dreamt of or seen on television or in movies. We now have those technologies at our disposal. So we really need to think about how we take advantage of those. And so we believe that urban air mobility is actually one of the best ways to do that. We understand that it's not going to be an overnight process, but we really need to make the investments now to be able to enjoy those services in the future. There are a lot of different things that will come into play, whether it's local regulations, local planning, national legislation, and national standards that need to be developed. So for all of these reasons, we believe that now is the time to really focus on promoting these, not only at the national level, but really at the city and the community level, frankly. Next slide, please. So why WISC? Really, WISC sees itself as a true partner with local city governments. We work very closely hand in hand with other city officials to ensure that we minimize the disruption that we're causing on the city, but also maximizing the opportunity and the support that we provide to the communities. We do this through a number of different efforts, and that includes community engagement strategies with the city. That includes, the city being able to promote local job creation, as well as economic growth and educational opportunities. Next slide. And so when we look at kind of the different opportunities that not only urban air mobility, but also WISC itself provides, it's really kind of these 5 main efforts. So when you look at the safety side of things, safety is a core part of what we built in our aircraft, and will continue to be a core part of everything that we do. It's not only in the aircraft, but it's also in the culture and the operations that we pursue. The development of multiple redundant systems within the aircraft, operational and testing standards that we're developing that far exceed those of general aviation, to really kind of demonstrate our commitment to safety. Most importantly, by going to self-piloting, we're removing the human element, which is one of the greatest causes of aviation accidents as it relates to general aviation. So pulling that human out really helps actually increase the safety margins. And so next would be sustainability. So we are obviously on an all-electric aircraft. And so we're committed to delivering a sustainable and environmentally friendly future, not only for at the national level, but for the local communities. And we provide that clean alternative to ground-based transportation that is able to then push broader kind of zero emission standards within mobility. For minimizing impact, as I mentioned earlier, we work very closely with the city to ensure that the city officials and local communities understand that there are, kind of acceptable standards for the way that UAM services are deployed into a community. One of the biggest concerns is obviously, in addition to pollution, which we obviously don't have to worry about because the electric nature of the aircraft, the next thing is normally noise. And so we work very closely with cities to ensure that the noise envelope of our aircraft is actually customized to each of the different cities. And if we can't do that via the aircraft, we'll adjust that via the operations. So a couple different knobs to turn to ensure that, again, we're really minimizing impact on the city and the communities that live within those cities. Also, we're trying to bring in kind of leading industry partners into the fold that would traditionally not necessarily be involved in maybe aviation, but trying to think creatively on how do we bring some of these new partners from around the world into the cities and the communities to be able to use best practices that might have previously not been used. So, for example, infrastructure development, vertiport planning and construction, and other ways of kind of executing on that noise management that I mentioned earlier. And then certainly economic development and educational opportunities are critical. So, electric aviation and eVTOL in particular and WISC really help to spur development on multiple levels. So whether it's on the ground through real estate development, construction, operational development as well, optimizing traffic routes and these types of things. In the air, it's really providing the kind of the economic stimulus to support aviation support roles such as maintenance and technicians and these types of folks. Obviously, there's a lot of customer-facing roles that we'll have, as well as ancillary industries such as the kind of the rideshare industry, cruise lines, hotels, number of different industries that will be augmented by air taxi services. And of course, last but not least is certainly education. So whether it's STEM or STEAM, different types of educational opportunities that the industry can actually bring to a region. Next slide, please. And so with that, keep it short, but really it takes all of us to work together to achieve that social acceptance of electric electric aircraft. And the investment has to start now in order to realize the gains and the opportunities of the future of urban air mobility. And so with that, I thank you and look forward to your questions.
Thanks for that very interesting presentation. Let me start out with a couple of questions. Can you elaborate a little further on your business model? Are you kind of comparable to an AV Uber on-demand type of a network when you deploy this?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Yes. So we don't plan on selling our aircraft. We plan on actually being the builder, the OEM, the original equipment manufacturer, and the operator. And so with that, we would then have an ecosystem of partners that are able to feed into our services. So you can imagine whether it be a multimodal such as a rideshare company or even a scooter company, airlines, cruises, whoever actually has an existing customer set that needs to transport their existing customers from one place to another within the city. So
Great. Members, other questions? Commissioner Starkey.
So you said within a city, so you don't envision between cities travel?
Good question. It depends on how far those two cities would be. But yeah, our range is somewhere on the order of 20 to 50 miles. And so with that, we really are kind of focusing on that urban core, the transportation from airports to a downtown or even downtown to a suburban area. Again, it really kind of depends on the city's sprawl, frankly.
So going a little further, we were just reading about the initiative in Orlando with Lilium to do this kind of travel between Orlando and Tampa. So in effect, you could kind of be that last mile air taxi. Would you share the same kind of, share the same vertiport, I think they were calling it, with another company? Is that kind of the way the industry's shaken out?
Yeah, it's a really good question again. So a couple things. So, right, we foresee a sufficient demand for there to be plenty of different companies that actually provide these air taxi services. So in many ways, we actually need folks like Lilium to help bolster the demand on and the services that are provided. You mentioned kind of their ranges. Yeah, they have, a very different kind of aircraft. I don't know the exact details of it, and I would hate to speak for them. But from what we've seen publicly, yeah, they would actually be quite a good fit for us, frankly, because they are able to move between cities, whereas we would really focus within the cities. As for infrastructure use, it's a really great question because I think many in the industry would agree that we do need to be able to share these vertiports. There's no way that each company could develop, at least at WISC, we believe, there's no way each company could develop its own proprietary vertiport and expect to exclude others from using it, not only from a business model perspective, but from a safety perspective. So we would really encourage others to share their vertiports, and we feel the same way. So in terms of if we were to develop vertiports. So.
Thank you. Interesting.
Yeah, I have one follow-up question too, and since Commissioner Starkey mentioned Lilium, I think they're going to deploy first in Europe with an actual pilot as opposed to a purely automated vehicle. Are you concerned about public acceptance of that first for your product, or do you think by the time it's ready for deployment, that'll be more universally accepted to have a fully automated vehicle?
Right. Many operators are going to the pilot first, largely because we expect it to be a bit easier for a piloted aircraft to not only be accepted, not to be accepted by the public, but actually by the regulators. Many businesses are trying to, obviously try and get in the air as fast as possible to be able to generate revenue. And so at WISC, we understand that that is a great idea. But in the end, most people in the industry would agree that we have to remove the pilot in order for this industry to scale, frankly. And I believe that across the industry, if you were to ask different operators, they would say, yes, eventually we need to get the pilot out to really help the business case close and to see the industry scale writ large. So at WISC, we believe if that is the ultimate end goal, let's try and go there now. And so that is why we're kind of pushing the envelope in that regard. We fully understand that from a regulatory perspective, as well from a community acceptance perspective, there's a lot of work to be done. Luckily, we are in a good place to be able to do that over the next years. So.
Are you envisioning kind of any site yet in the country for with a partnership as the OEM to pilot test this project? Any beta tests going on yet for?
Yeah, so we have actually been conducting operations both here in the U.S. and New Zealand. And we're certainly looking at the U.S. as well as other countries, and then specific cities within the United States. We haven't yet announced what cities we will be deploying to, but watch this space, I would say.
Great. Well, we hope that you will certainly consider Florida as one of your options, and any way we can help you and facilitate that in the Tampa Bay region, we'd be enter into those discussions. Other questions?
This is Commissioner Kemp.
Mr. Kemp, yes.
Yeah, my button kept being muted when I tried to unmute it. Yeah, I understand. So I have a couple questions. Yeah. So you said that this vehicle takes 2 people and that's it, correct?
That is correct.
So it's not really a mass transit vehicle.
No, it would not. It's not designed for mass transit, at least not at this point. For what I can say here, yes, that currently we have two seats.
Yeah, and I think the Lilium that's spoken about, at least what I read, has 4 seats, and then the pilot seat. They also expect the pilot on theirs as well. And so what I read about the Lilium was that it was about the cost of what would be a first class air fare. That would be the same also, I expect, for this.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the details of Lilium's kind of cost models, but for us, when we did the analysis on how to size the aircraft and the ranges, we really relied a lot on kind of what does ground transportation look like today, especially from the rideshare perspective. And on average, in most cities, most rideshare are actually occupied with 1 to 1.3, I believe, passengers per ride. So it made the most sense to start with an aircraft that has 2 seats if you are trying to follow that rideshare model. As for pricing, again, I'm not sure what Lilium's kind of model is in terms of range and their existing costs. But for us, we see it, somewhere on the order of a certain amount per passenger mile. And so that'll depend in different regions and that type of stuff. So, but more plus or minus, yeah, I think you could probably assume that that's a reasonable expectation in terms of what Lilium has already laid out.
Right. And so it would be you said ride shares are 1 to 1.3?
Yeah, actually that's kind of the average.
Kind of doesn't surprise me, but yeah. So, but yours right now, because you'd have to have a pilot with the 2 seats, so you would just be carrying 1?
No, it's actually, the aircraft is autonomous, so both of those would be revenue seats.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate the information.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Members, other questions, follow-ups? Well, thanks so much for that presentation. We look forward to following your progress, and please keep us posted as to further progress there. So thanks very much.
Very interesting.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Next up is Area Gondola Manufacturers Overview, and Dan Cole is recognized along with John Mausch.
Good morning. Hey, this is John Mock with Lightner Pump.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for taking time to allow me to present these aerial gondola options. I'd like to I'm the sales manager for North America for Lightner Pump of America. We are pretty exclusively into transportation by wire rope. I'm going to show you a number of different have available, and just to try to fill you in on what's available. But first, I'd like to go through our company. We are a global company. We're made up of a number of different types of manufacturing. As you can see here, we're under group HTI, who's out of northern Italy, out of Vipitino. And anyway, we've been in the United States for since the 50s, and well established. The company has actually been in the business mostly in the alpine and the ski lift business for that length of time, but currently, and as of the last 10 to 15 years, we've had a number of urban applications, many in Central America and South America, but also a few in the United States and in Central Europe. So let's go to slide 3, please. The size of our company, as you can see, we've had approximately a €1 billion turnover in 2018. You can see the breakdown of the different groups and what they did, but primarily we're into aerial transportation. Let's go ahead and go to slide 4, please. This shows our global capacity. These are our production facilities and offices. The one that we have here is in Grand Junction, Colorado. We've produced about 600 installations out of this facility since we came to Grand Junction in 1981, approximately. There's a number of facilities in Central Europe and France, Italy, and then also we have facilities in China and so on. So let's go ahead and go to slide 4, please. Typically these rope propulsion units are been for alpine environments. I think over the years they've been around for well over 100 years. If you look back in history, you can find actually drawings and mentions of ropeways back to the 1500s. It was a thing that happened for the industrial development of the United States and Pennsylvania and the East Coast with transportation of coal. Okay, let's go ahead and go to slide 6. This rope haul pass-through transportation, not only for the ski lift industry, but also we've done quite a bit of tourism and panoramic viewing. Also, so there's a lot of installations now out that are for amusement and also for sightseeing and access to sometimes to sites that are just very difficult. I think this particular one goes to a religious site in, I'm not certain where this one is, but I'm pretty sure that's where this one goes, up onto where there was a pilgrimage of people who would go up a path and hike up to the top of this particular mountain. Let's go to slide 7. We also do material transport. Now, this is an example of a cable crane. These are typically used for building dams and mining. We had this Agudio group, who's also part of Lightner in Italy, that did the cable cranes that installed the bypass bridge on Lake Mead. And it was a big job. And these are up all over the world. They're very large units and can pick up hundreds of tons. Okay, let's go ahead and go to slide 8. There's also what we call funicular. So there's also these cable-driven trains. This one we call mini metro. Pretty innovative transportation, and there's a number of these units, far less than the aerial transportation. They consist of a guideway, road propulsion, and then vehicles. Let's go ahead to slide 9. This particular unit we just installed a few years ago in the Miami-Dade airport. It's much larger than the one you saw before. This one has a vehicle that holds nearly 200 passengers. Okay, let's go to slide 11. And before you start that video, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that one. Let's go to, this is slide 10. This is an installation we put in about 10 years ago, approximately maybe 11. This is an aerial tramway in New York City. It connects Manhattan with the Roosevelt Island. It's about a half a mile long. It's a pretty iconic unit. There was the original one, I think, was installed in the mid-70s. It ran up until that point 10 years ago, where we replaced it with this more modern unit. This is in service 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, you know, it's pretty iconic. It's really made for mass transit. And I think the island occupies by about 17,000 people who come to Manhattan to work and go to school and so on. That's a very successful operation. We also have the operations and maintenance account for this. So we do have a staff, local staff there of about 25 people who do the operations and maintenance of the tramway. You know, it's been in about, I don't know, 6 or 7 different movies, and it's a really neat installation. Takes you right into, goes next to the Ed Koch Bridge, goes over the East River, and lands on 2nd Avenue. Okay, let's go ahead and go to slide 11. This is just a short video that shows some of the advantages of the urban transportation, the way that it can be installed and operated, how it operates in its own medium, that it doesn't compete with rubber-tired vehicles on highways. And anyway, let's go ahead and play this video, please. So again, this travels above, I guess we're not going to do the sound, but this travels typically above the rubber tire vehicles on the highways, doesn't get caught in the congestion, continues to deliver continuous. The ease of installation, how fast it gets built, typically put up in less than a year. And the costs, much cheaper than mass transportation by rail, either light rail or by underground subway. You know, and because of its ability and how its roots in the alpine environment, it's able to span over large spans and also go up quite steep terrain also. Provides a view that you don't see from most other mass transportation. And it's very accessible by not only by ADA passengers, but also strollers and so on. Let's go ahead and go to slide 12. So this just shows some of the basics about the type of ropeways that we provide. We'll start with the top supported one. The simplest device is is typically the monocable gondola. It uses one cable to suspend or support the cabins and also to propel them. The second one being the 2S system uses a stationary rope we refer to as a track rope. It's fixed at the ends, and the vehicles have a carriage that travel on that rope track and are propelled by a separate rope. And then the much larger vehicles, which we'll get into, the 3S system or the tri-cable, which have quite large cabins. It'll have 2 track ropes to support the vehicles and then 1 haul rope to propel them. The next one, the one that's much more low capacity, being the pulsed gondola. That's a monocable unit, so it has the same capabilities, or uses the same type of rope suspension and propulsion, just 1 rope, but it uses gangs of gondola cabins versus the detachable type that we were looking at above. And then the aerial tramway, which is what we just looked at Roosevelt Island, typically with 2 track ropes and then a single haul rope. And then there's the rail systems. These 3 different ones, a funicular, which is more or less what we just looked at Miami-Dade Airport. Then there's very steep ones, the inclined elevators, which are typically very short and smaller. And the mini metro, the one we looked at, which is multiple vehicles that run on the rail. Let's go to slide 13. Here's an example of an urban monocable ropeway. This one is in Montjuic in Barcelona. It travels up onto a mountain, but it is also used for more than just the tourism. It's also joined some communities together. Let's go to 14. This is a monocable one. This is the very simple monocable detachable. It's capable of moving up to 4,500 people per hour. It's 6 meters per second. Let's call that 15 miles an hour. With cabin capacities up to 10, possibly 12 passengers. Let's go to slide 14, please. Or 15, I'm sorry. 15, this is a tri-cable unit, or 3S. This particular one is in Bolzano, in Italy. It goes up to a small town called Mitten, which is like a suburb, although it is up on a hillside. This is a much larger unit and has capacities of up to 35 people. This is a spectacular machine here. Let's go ahead and go to slide 16. This allows a much higher capacity, up to 6,000 people per hour. Travels faster at 8.5 meter per second, and the vehicles are up to 35 passengers. This particular one, the cabins actually come in and stop rather than being the slow speed, typically the slow speed loading and unloading. You can see this picture of a gentleman loading with a baby stroller, and they're all level walk-in, extremely wide doors. So they really facilitate being able to move a large number of people. Then you can see in that there's also a picture of a 2S system there in Hong Kong. That one also goes over a large body of water, but you can see the difference in the single cable, track cable versus the 2 track cables. Okay, let's go to 16 or 17, please. So just as an overview of these ropeways, so the space requirements are quite low. They fit into an urban environment very easily. Spans can be, depending on the type of system, can be up to, well over 1 kilometer apart. With the monocable system, they won't be that far apart. The space requirements are minimal. They can fit on top of city streets. They can go over the top of the buildings. And, it's continuous transportation. So unlike where you have a larger vehicle like a bus or a train that arrives periodically, these come in continuous, just a few seconds apart, and deliver more continuous delivery of passengers. And they're very cost-effective energy-wise, environmentally friendly. The drive units are all mounted stationary in the stations. They're typically electrically driven. And so therefore the vehicles are all connected together by the wire rope. So those that are going uphill are countered by those that are going downhill. Really, all we're transporting is the differential of the passenger weights and a little bit of friction that might be caused by the drive units or the towers. You know, the cabins are very comfortable. They can be, you know, have an amazing view depending on where they are. Even the one in New York City is just a spectacular view of the East River and Roosevelt Island and coming into Manhattan. They are very quick to build. You know, unlike a bridge or a roadway, there's less disruption in the construction. It's isolated to those individual towers or the stations, and there's minimal disruption of the traffic flows and of the buildings. As I said earlier, in the environmental sustainability, they're very energy efficient and typically run off electricity. They're very safe. They have a safety record on aerial tramways and ropeways are lower than that of commercial aircraft. We can go over, as it says, clearing obstacles, buildings, trees, mountains, streams, rivers, and overcome great gradients of up to 100%. That's a much smaller capital investment than roads, bridges, subways, trains, and so on. And we've had some places, particularly in Central America, where the social impact's been incredible. It's changed the way a lot of communities are changed in economic impact. So where people can get to work quicker and be able to make better money. And it's exclusive route for the ropeways in the air. It's a three-dimensional solution, so we don't get caught in traffic. Okay, very accessible, and it can have some cool architecture. Sometime if we ever want to look at that, I can show you some amazing architecture that's been done throughout the world. Okay, let's go to slide 18. Here's some of the current places where gondolas are being used. You can see that there's a lot of these that are in Central America. Mexico City is a major one. The one in Medellin is a number of sections, like 9 different gondolas. Let's go to 19. You know, one thing I'd mention too is that the number of systems that we have worldwide currently represent an hourly capacity of 8 million riders. So in New York City, this is the Roosevelt Island, 1,400 people per hour. As I said, it runs 20 hours a day. It's a major part of the connection of Roosevelt Island. There is a subway stop there, but the F train is the one that comes in from Queens, and it's often jam-packed. So really, I think this is the commuter of choice for those islanders. And it also gets quite a big tourist capacity during the summer times. Okay, let's go to 20, please. Here's the one in Medellin. This is another major connector in Santo Domingo. And it's part and connected to the mass transportation. So it ends up at a train stop, and then that's where the commuters. Well, that's one thing I should say about the aerial transportation is it's a really good solution for the last 2-mile solution. It doesn't do a long distance where you need to go 10, 15, or 20 miles. It's not a good solution for that. This has got an incredibly high capacity through the different units. Put in 2004, it's been very successful. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. This one's in Turkey. Similar, it goes, you can see how we can span right over the top of the buildings with these. Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide. And this is the one in Mexico City. It was just commissioned a few years ago. And again, it's a highly successful. They're going to continue to build another 3-mile section on this. Okay, and then this is the bi-cable unit in Hong Kong. I think you can see the little bit of difference in that where this has a track rope. You can see how far these can span now. when you get into the track ropers, it's pretty massive. Okay, let's go to 24. And then this was the one we showed you earlier in Bolzano. So this one has a real compact station right near downtown Bolzano, and then it trans up to a little town of Ridden. It's the first tri-cable unit in Italy. There's a number of these systems now globally, but these are fairly large. These do a real high level of capacity, up to about 6,000 people per hour. Okay, next slide. So if you just do this video, this particular one is in Ecuador. It's in Gualeguay. And you can just see how this thing's right over the road, and how this particular station is basically supported right in the median. This is a brand new installation that just went into service. Honestly, I should tell you, I think this one's actually just being commissioned right now. It's not quite in service yet. So anyway, that's the end of my presentation. I appreciate your attention. I'm certainly available to answer any questions.
John, thanks for that presentation. As you know, we're studying gondola deployment here in our service area, and we welcome that very illuminating presentation and information. Question I had, obviously transit has been severely impacted by COVID worldwide, as you know. Can you go over some of the clean mechanisms for the trams or gondolas that you have? Do you use a UV lighting to sanitize the units? Is there, cleaned every frequency? What kind of frequency, and when are they cleaned? Are they flash cleaned, or how is that done for safety reasons?
So far, what's happened is there's been a limit to capacity in the vehicles. Like in New York City, that one, which is a 100-passenger cabin, is limited to about 35 in order to keep the social distancing. There also, passengers are required to wear a mask. There are sanitation devices. We do have a fan mister that's available. We're using in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and around, which when the cabin comes in and is empty, it blasts disinfectant in for a short period of time, and then that dries quickly. I don't think we have any of the UV units, but there's no reason why that can't be done. And quite honestly, I believe most people use the electrostatic backpack sprayer type disinfectant. Some of that stuff lasts for several days, but there's lots of cleaning. That's typically what's happened so far.
Okay, yeah. Members, other questions? Commissioner Starkey?
I'm interested in the cost of these. And I was just going through your report, looking for more information on the costs. I would guess different kinds are more expensive than others. But just in general, which seem to be the most economical type?
So, that's typically driven by the capacity. That's the main driver of the cost. So the most economical unit is the monocable detachable. It gives a good, 4,000 people per hour on that. And, they're very site specific. So it's difficult for me to put a price on anything really without knowing where it's going and the construction costs and so on. I could give you like an idea of like a mile-long system, for instance, of monocable, 4,000 people per hour could be somewhere in the $20 million range.
So I see a lot.
I'm sorry. As that capacity goes up and you get into tri-cable units, the cost goes up in the same, basically linear.
I ski a lot, so I've ridden a lot of these different types. So, I'd never thought of it in an urban setting, but it's interesting that all these very dense communities are putting these in. Well, the one I think it was Hong Kong, was that coming from the airport?
Because you can see that.
You know what, I'm not 100% certain. I know that the big portion of the reason why that was done that way was because of the river that goes over. And I do believe it's I do believe it's coming from the airport, but I can't confirm.
Has your company looked at, or has any city looked at putting these on tops of buildings? So rather than putting the pole in the ground, it goes from building top to building top?
I certainly haven't seen that at all. So no, I know there's plenty that go over buildings, but not ones that are attached to them.
Okay, well, it's very interesting. Thank you.
Other questions? Pat.
Thank you. Yeah. I've just, the plan for this is to be in Clearwater.
Well, we're studying alignments now. David, you want to address that?
I can address that. The feasibility study that we are looking at doing would look at two potential corridors, one in St. Petersburg that would connect Tropicana Field to the new St. Pete Pier, and another one in Clearwater that would connect downtown Clearwater to Clearwater Beach. And again, this would just be a feasibility study to look at, do either of these corridors make sense? I think the goal of the study would be to have enough information to give the elected officials in the two cities enough information to decide, is it worth it to take it to the next step, which would be a detailed PD&E study.
So, and how long are each of those lines?
Well, the route has not been determined yet, so I couldn't give you a length.
All right, but is there a basic length from, I mean, you named two very specific places, to Tropicana Field from exactly where?
From the area around Tropicana Field to the St. Pete Pier.
So how far?
I do not know what the distance is.
Seems like that might be a mile or two or something. And then downtown Clearwater to Clearwater Beach?
Correct.
And we don't even have like a basic miles?
Well, we haven't even developed a scope of work yet for the RFP. What Blanton from Florida Pinellas and I have been doing for the past several weeks has been going around meeting with different stakeholders to make sure that there's support for moving forward with the study. Our next step is developing a scope of work to put this out to bid.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Pat. Any other questions? And again, let me emphasize that we are doing this as a study pursuant to the appropriations from the Florida legislature to study innovative transportations, and they specifically mentioned gondolas. We are not anywhere near the any kind of RFP for specific equipment or anything like that. So I want to caution people not to jump to that kind of conclusion. So, and thank you, Brian, for elucidating that. And thank you, John, for your presentation. We look forward to keeping you posted on what we're doing and vice versa. So,
okay, thank you for the opportunity. We'd look forward to getting into the details with you.
Absolutely. Is there any old or new business to come before the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Earlier this morning, we just, we talked a little bit about the Lilium project that's been in the paper and our desire to make sure we're working collaboratively with the Orlando area. David has told me that behind the scenes, there are discussions going on, but you know, we just want to be sure that TBarta is involved and engaged in that opportunity. I think it's really exciting that this is coming, whether it be from the government side or the private sector. So, you know, this travel is coming, and we want to be at the table.
All the modes are coming, and I think we need to be at the forefront in this entire region to do that, and work with everyone, because as we've indicated, there's been indicated to us, these pads will be universally used by all kinds of vendors and different companies, free to all. So we welcome the opportunity to do that. Thanks for reminding. Anything else, comments? The next meeting is January 22nd in Manatee County. So we look forward to seeing you there. Happy holidays, everyone. And With no further ado, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
A reminder about the 1:30 event we have today with folks from around the state. Where the trailhead is, well, we don't have a trailhead, but we're using the Duke corridor at Trinity Boulevard as our trailhead, and we have former Senate President Andy Gardner speaking and many others. This is a big, significant trail connection for the state, and we're real excited about the regional implications for the trail community.
Looking for, what's the intersection? Is there an address or intersection?
There's not really an address, so it's on Trinity Boulevard. I guess if you looked at Fox Hollow Golf Club,
yeah,
it's just before there because that's how we got through the golf course was to use the Duke corridor going through the golf course.
Sounds good.
So and then afterwards, of course, I'm hosting a reception at the barn at Starkey Market. And I will warn you, we're closing it to the public at 3, but we won't kick anyone out. We have a big concert there tonight and tomorrow night with a country band called Low Cash. So it won't look like it normally does, but you'll see a lot of people scurrying around getting ready. We welcome you all.